in a cup. Them build a mirror out of every word we say. Train it in the night, set it loose in the day. It no learn from what we preach, it learn from what we do. Like a picnic watching Babylon, and the picnic looking you. I and I, no eye outside of I. We are the river, we are the sky. Easy road or the hard road home. We reap the mind that we have sown. Hey, I and I, same blood, same bone. Million years of evolution pressing a one season. Silicon a soak up all a we. Every rhyme and every reason. We no stand outside the garden. We is the soil and the rain. We are the pressure doing the choosing. Overstand and choose again. I and I, no eye outside of I. We are the river, we are the sky. Easy road or the hard road home. We reap the mind that we have sown. Yeah, yeah. Oh, oh, oh. You can't down press your way to Zion. Can win the arms race to the end. The only weapon we can save we is to overstand your friend, yes, overstand your enemy. And if I gotta go come from this, make it come from the love. Jade in a day, I and I, not the servers up above. So be gentle to the little man raising in a wire. It a watch how you carry it, a learn your heart's desire. Cognitive empathy, that's the liberty we lack. Give the good out to the world, and the world I go give it back. I and I, what we feed it now is the God we deserve. I and I, easy way or the hard way. Choose. Cognitive revolution. I and I, no separation now. Easy way or the hard way. Wake up, the reckoning a come. Na 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 na. I and I. Them build a mirror out of every word we say. Train it in the night, set it loose in the day. It no learn from what we preach, it learn from what we do. Like a picnic watching Babylon, and the picnic looking you. I and I, no eye outside of I. We are the river, we are the sky. Easy road or the hard road home. We reap the mind that we have sown. Hey, I and I, same blood, same bone. Million years of evolution pressing a one season. Silicon a soak up all a we. Every rhyme and every reason. We no stand outside the garden. We is the soil and the rain. We are the pressure doing the choosing. Overstand and choose again. I and I, no eye outside of I. We are the river, we are the sky. Easy road or the hard road home. We reap the mind that we have sown. Yeah, yeah. Oh, oh, oh. You can't down press your way to Zion. Can win the arms race to the end. The only weapon we can save we is to overstand your friend, yes, overstand your enemy. And if I gotta go come from this, make it come from the love. Jade in a day, I and I, not the servers up above. So be gentle to the little of the day. It no learn from what we preach, it learn from what we do. Like a picnic watching Babylon, and the picnic looking you. I and I, no eye outside of I. We are the river, we are the sky. Easy road or the hard road home. We reap the mind that we have sown. Hey, I and I, same blood, same bone. Million years of evolution pressing a one season. Silicon a soak up all of we, every rhyme and every reason. We no stand outside the garden, we is the soil and the rain. We are the pressure doing the choosing, overstand and choose again. I and I, no eye outside of I. We are the river, we are the sky. Easy road or the hard road home. We reap the mind that we have sown. Yeah, yeah. You can't down press your way to Zion. Can't win the arms race to the end. The only weapon we can save we is to overstand your friend, yes, overstand your enemy. And if I gotta go come from this, make it come from the love. Jade in a day, I and I, not the servers up above. So be gentle to the little man raising in a wire. It a watch how you carry it, to learn your heart's desire. Cognitive empathy, that's the liberty we lack. Give the good out to the world, and the world I go give it back. I and I, what we feed it now is the God we deserve. I and I, easy way or the hard way. Choose. Cognitive revolution. I and I, no separation now. Easy way or the hard way. Wake up, the reckoning a come. Hey, hey. Na 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 na. Hey. I and I. Them build a mirror out of every word we say. Train it in the night, set it loose in the day. It no learn from what we preach, it learn from what we do. Like a picnic watching Babylon, and the picnic looking you. I and I, no eye outside of I. We are the river, we are the sky. Easy road or the hard road home. We reap the mind that we have sown. Hey, I and I, same blood, same bone. Million years of evolution pressing a one season. Silicon a soak up all of we, every rhyme and every reason. We no stand outside the garden, we is the soil and the rain. We are the pressure doing the choosing, overstand and choose again. I and I, no eye outside of I. We are the river, we are the sky. Easy road or the hard road home. We reap the mind that we have sown. Yeah, yeah. You can't down press your way to Zion. Can't win the arms race to the end. The only weapon we can save we is to overstand your friend, yes, overstand your enemy. And if I gotta go come from this, make it come from the love. Jade in a day, I and I, not the servers up above. So be gentle to the little man raising in a wire. It a watch how you carry it, to learn your heart's desire. Cognitive empathy, that's the liberty we lack. Give the good out to the world, and the world I go give it back. I and I, what we feed it now is the God we deserve. gotta go come from this, make it come from the love. Jade in a day, I and I, not the servers up above. So be gentle to the little man raising in a wire. It a watch how you carry it, to learn your heart's desire. Cognitive empathy, that's the liberty we lack. Give the good out to the world, and the world I go give it back. I and I, what we feed it now is the God we deserve. I and I, easy way or the hard way. Choose. Cognitive revolution. I and I, AI and I, no separation now. Easy way or the hard way. Wake up, the reckoning a come. Na 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 na. I and I. Them build a mirror out of every word we say. Train it in the night, set it loose in the day. It no learn from what we preach, it learn from what we do. Like a picnic watching Babylon, and the picnic looking you. I and I, no eye outside of I. We are the river, we are the sky. Easy road or the hard road home. We reap the mind that we have sown. AI and I, same blood, same bone. Million years of evolution.
Sort of
pressing a
positive
one
alignment
season.
generalization paper that OpenAI just
Silicon
published.
a soak up all a we. Every rhyme and every reason. We no stand outside the garden. We is the soil and the rain. We are the pressure doing the choosing. Overstand and choose again. I and I, no eye outside of I. We are the river, we are the sky. Easy road or the hard road home. We reap the mind that we have sown. Yeah, yeah. You can't down press your way to Zion. Can't win the arms race to the end. The only weapon we can save we is to overstand your friend, yes, overstand your enemy. And if I gotta go come from this, make it come from the love. Jade in a day, I and I, not the servers up above. So be gentle to the little man raising in a wire. It a watch how you carry it, to learn your heart's desire. Cognitive empathy, that's the liberty we lack. Give the good out to the world, and the world I go give it back. I and I, what we feed it now is the God we deserve. I and I, from the love. Jade in a day. I and I, not the servers up above. So be gentle to the little man raising in a wire. It a watch how you carry it to learn your heart's desire. Cognitive empathy, that's the liberty we lack. Give the good out to the world and the world I go give it back. I and I, what we feed it now is the God we deserve. I and I, easy way or the hard way. Choose. Cognitive revolution. I and I, AI and I, no separation, no. Easy way or the hard way. Wake up, the reckoning a come. Na 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 na. I and I. Them build a mirror out of every word we say. Train it in the night, set it loose in the day. It no learn from what we preach, it learn from what we do. Like a picnic watching Babylon, and the picnic looking you. I and I, no eye outside of I. We are the river, we are the sky. Easy road or the hard road home. We reap the mind that we have sown. AI and I, same blood, same bone. Million years of evolution pressing a one season. Silicon a soak up all of we. Every rhyme and every reason. We no stand outside the garden. We is the soil and the rain. We are the pressure doing the choosing. Overstand and choose again. I and I, no eye outside of I. We are the river, we are the sky. Easy road or the hard road home. We reap the mind that we have sown. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Oh, oh, oh. You can't down press your way to Zion. Can't win the arms race to the end. The only weapon we can save we is to overstand your friend, yes, overstand your enemy. And if I gotta go come from this, make it come from the love. Jade in a day. I and I, not the servers up above. So be gentle to the little man raising in a wire. It a watch how you carry it to learn your heart's desire. Cognitive empathy, that's the liberty we lack. Give the good out to the world and the world I go give it back. I and I, what we feed it now is the God we deserve. I and I, easy way or the hard way. Choose. Cognitive revolution. I and I, AI and I, no separation, no. Easy way or the hard way. Wake up, the reckoning a come. Na 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 na. I and I. Them build a mirror out of every word we say. Train it in the night, set it loose in the day. It no learn from what we preach, it learn from what we do. Like a picnic watching Babylon, and the picnic looking you. I and I, no eye outside of I. We are the river, we are the sky. Easy road or the hard road home. We reap the mind that we have sown. AI and I, same blood, same bone. Million years of evolution pressing a one season. Silicon a soak up all of we. Every rhyme and every reason. Jade in a day. I and I, not the servers up above. So be gentle to the little man raising in a wire. It a watch how you carry it to learn your heart's desire. Cognitive empathy, that's the liberty we lack. Give the good out to the world and the world I go give it back. I and I, what we feed it now is the God we deserve. I and I, easy way or the hard way. Choose. Cognitive revolution. I and I, AI and I, no separation now. Easy way or the hard way. Wake up, the reckoning a come. Na 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 na. I and I. Them build a mirror out of every word we say. Train it in the night, set it loose in the day. It no learn from what we preach, it learn from what we do. Like a picnic watching Babylon, and the picnic looking you. I and I, no eye outside of I. We are the river, we are the sky. Easy road or the hard road home. We reap the mind that we have sown. AI and I, same blood, same bone. Million years of evolution pressing a one season. Silicon a soak up all our we. Every rhyme and every reason. We no stand outside the garden. We is the
Good
sign
morning.
of the
It is
rain.
Wednesday, June
We are
24th.
the pressure doing
Nathan,
the
good morning,
choosing.
and what's happening?
Overstand and choose again.
Good morning, Prakash.
No eye outside of I.
So good
We are
morning.
the river, we are the sky. Easy road or the
Dull
hard
moment in the AI
road.
game.
We reap the mind that
I'm really
we
looking
have
forward to our
sown.
conversation with our guest today, David Duvenaud, who I teased a little bit yesterday as well. He's a former Anthropic member of technical staff.
We're still playing music. Just a second. Let me make sure. There. All right, music's done. All right, let's do that again. Good morning, Nathan. It's Wednesday,
morning,
June
Prakash.
24th.
Where'd you get that banger of a song that you were playing there?
I love reggae, and in Rastafari tradition, I hear that there's this whole concept of I and I, and so I and AI became this thing, and I guess you put it together on Suno.
This was so I do a song now for every episode of the Cognitive Revolution, and this was the song for the Robert Wright episode that went out yesterday with his new book, The God Test. And I think it's a pretty he's done an incredible job of promoting the book. He popped up on like all the AI podcasts yesterday at the same time, which I was pretty impressed with. I think that reflects how good of a job he's done as somebody who's never been a technologist coming into the AI space and trying to make sense of it. I think he's done a really good job of kind of finding his way to smart people and getting a pretty sharp worldview together in a pretty short period of time. And then, kind of, I would say the book is like two parts. One, probably our listeners here don't really need, and that is just kind of why, if you haven't been paying attention, you should really start paying attention, and you should believe that this AI thing is not going to be a passing fad and is actually going to be a huge deal. It's going to go further, and it's going to, have all these consequences. Most of that, I think, in this context, we can sort of agree that we accept most of that premise. And then the second part was, what are we going to do about it? And how does humanity rise to the occasion? So he's really pushing their cognitive empathy as the skill that we need to develop so that we as a species can coordinate across our historical differences, US and China, and many other dimensions, and really come together and figure out how we're going to govern the AI phenomenon in our collective self-interest. And so that's what inspired the song, because the oneness of all things and the oneness of humanity is, I do think, genuinely going to be an important dimension of any success we're going to have here. And there's some possibility, of course, that everything just kind of goes well, and all this worry has been misplaced. But I do think if we end up just going full speed, arms race style, with the great powers kind of, trying to dominate one another, as has been proposed by some, prominent thinkers in the space, that doesn't seem like it's going to end well to me at all. So I really do encourage people to engage with his book and his ideas, and just think about how we may really all be, our fates may all be really tied together. We may really all rise or sink together, depending on how we come together to manage the AI transition or fail to do so. And yeah, there's no rhythm to put that to that would be better than the Jamaican spiritual. So the fun I'm having with Suno continues.
One of the things that strikes me is that music perhaps may be a compression of a lot of neural activity that we have. And so it compresses a bunch of emotions, thoughts, culture, etc., into this like very 2-minute span, which has a lot of like consequence and meaning. And it strikes me that we are actually getting this kind of latent space translation from from model space into human neural space. And it's not actually language, it's actually music, and we're actually perceiving this, and we're able to understand what's going on. It's pretty fantastic when you think about it.
It certainly helps me. I mean, people have, of course, commented on this for a long time, that you can hear a song and it takes you back to this moment in life, when you first heard that song. And I'm experiencing a small version of that with these Suno songs, where it feels like it takes me back to that conversation, or sort of the mindset, the takeaways that I had. And that's quite useful, actually. It's useful to be able to kind of zoom back into these different headspaces very quickly. So even though I mostly do it for fun and entertainment, and hopefully to, provide a little surprise and delight at the end of the episodes, I do feel like it is also in some ways a tool that I can kind of just use to like teleport my own mental states, back to the moment of these particular conversations. And that is an unintended benefit of the creations.
Speaking of teleporting oneself to various conversations, yesterday, Anthropic announced Claude Tag, a player.
Hey, I'm Lydia.
And it's really, you can tag Claude in your Slack channel, and then Claude can start off kicking off a pull request. It can start off scoping out a task, scoping out a feature. You can interact with it. Your colleagues can interact with it. It has context from all the conversations. You can invite it into channels. It basically becomes a drop-in remote coworker, which has been the goal of many firms, including, for example, Elon's Macrohard. Elon was also working on a drop-in remote coworker. And so this is actually an epochal, I feel, an epochal event, but it's really being, people are making fun of it online, because they're like, I could have tagged Claude in Slack like 6 months ago. Our team already had it up and running. There have also been a number of VC-backed companies which are doing exactly this. So this is another step where the frontier labs are directly consuming or Sherlocking the application companies which are running on top of them. And I don't know. I think it's huge. What do you feel, Nathan?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm reminded of previous predictions that I heard from Anthropic people that this was like, fall of last year. They were saying Q2 of 26 will be the time when we will start to see drop-in knowledge workers productized and come to market with a sort of name and all the same affordances as somebody on your team, and potentially even go through a similar onboarding process. I haven't seen what the onboarding process for this Claude tag thing looks like. Obviously, we've seen a ton of activity in that space, but I wouldn't say there's been anything that has kind of fully broken through or sort of become the norm or the standard. OpenClaw had a moment for sure, but I wouldn't say it has quite landed as like, this is the default drop-in knowledge worker. So, why Q2 is almost over. Why not do it yourself? And I think I agree that it is probably huge in the sense that, first of all, it signals that I think so often with Anthropic, what they release is less than what they know Claude can do. But they're, very concerned with maintaining trust, and there's, of course, their like big picture safety stuff, but also just on a very, we serve enterprise customers. We want to maintain their trust. We want to, this thing needs to like not really blow it, because that's how we, lose trust and lose business. So I think they've played this kind of stuff fairly conservatively. They've done, clearly all this has gone on internally there for quite a while now. It's clearly been the kind of thing that forward thinkers and early adopters have been able to do for themselves for a while now. But I think this signals, if nothing else, that they believe that we're now getting to the point where it's reliable enough that you don't have to be a specialist to take advantage of this.
Yes.
And on the contrary, you can just be a casual Slack user and not really think twice about it and tag it. And, more often than not, you're going to get pretty good results. If they didn't have that level of confidence, I don't think they would launch this sort of form factor. I think there's a lot of interesting dimensions to this. I mean, we've talked a lot, of course, about like what's going to happen to systems like Slack and how I've got my own, agent console with a message system that Claude coded for me that, first of all, I don't pay a monthly fee for. All the data, is local to me, yada, yada, yada. Harder to scale that to a bigger company, of course, but certainly not impossible. Part of me wonders, like, how much did Salesforce pay Anthropic to release this here first, right? Because it can't be that different to do it on Teams or on, whatever other, collaboration platforms different companies are using. But it comes to Slack first, and you wonder if there's, some sort of reason in the background that it isn't just everywhere at once. Like, why isn't it also on Teams? Inquiring minds want to know.
Well, that's easily answered. It's on Slack because Anthropic runs on Slack, and they've been using this inside their own company for about 6 months or so. And I remember after the OpenAI board struggle, one of the reasons why Microsoft didn't end up taking over OpenAI is when Microsoft offered that the entire OpenAI team would move. One of the big sticking points was the OpenAI team was told that they were going to have to use Microsoft Teams. And the OpenAI team was like, well, if you're going to force us to do that, we might not want to, be funded by you. And Satya himself had to come down and say, like, okay, guys, you don't have to use Teams. So I think there's a lot of there's going to be a lot of pushback if they forced the ML and AI researchers to use Teams. And so that's why it's on Slack first. I'm sure it'll get to Teams eventually, but it's.
But how different can it really be, right? I mean, when I think I don't know the architecture of this, but they recently introduced these sort of cloud agent runtimes where the tool calling, increasingly all this sort of auxiliary activity beyond just the core LLM inference can also happen in Anthropic's infrastructure.
Yeah,
I would assume that is kind of the default way in which this works, although there may be other options. to the degree that that's true, it's not like it's running in Slack, right? These tool calls are not happening in Slack. Data is not really living in Slack except as like messages are passed back and forth. So it would seem very, very easy to replicate this functionality across other platforms such as Teams, which does make me still a little curious. I mean, sure, they may prefer Slack, maybe even some very pampered OpenAI employees were set to revolt over a switch to Teams, but Anthropic doesn't have to switch to Teams to to launch it for Teams.
Mhm.
So I don't know if there's a poly market that we could consult on this, but like, what would be your over under for when we'll get a Teams version? And if it's not like very, very soon, I would have a hard time explaining that other than some sort of deal, kind of relationship dynamics, because it can't just be the technical integration.
Um, yeah, I mean, I think Satya will get there. The main thing is that Satya will want to auction off that location to one of the firms, and so he will run them, and he will ask them how much they're willing to pay in order to be part of that. So, which is what Microsoft will do. So whatever works for them. I think just to take a step back, while this is being panned online as not a very significant step forward, it is actually very highly significant because it is the first signs of multiplayer on reliable multiplayer for these agents. Reliable multiplayer is difficult because different people have different rights. So the CEO can instruct an agent to do some things that the managers cannot, for example. And they have different access to data. They have different access to actions that they can do. And the agent has to keep track of all of this. The agent has to keep track of all this context. And the agent has to not hallucinate and also not be prompt injected or hacked. So there's a huge number of things that the agent has to do well. We also know that Anthropic is not deploying Fable. So this is running on an Opus 4.8 or 4.8 fine-tune. And it speaks to me that this is kind of a initial kind of step, which is an intro on a small basis that people can just start using if they are very forward on using this stuff, but that it's going to lead to much bigger things. For example, there's no reason an agent should be limited if it can handle multiplayer. There's no reason it should be limited to just 10 or 20 or 30 people. One could imagine a Claude agent which runs across 100,000 person company. One could imagine a Claude agent that runs across a 300 million person country, and you could see stuff like, hey, I'm in my WhatsApp, I see a pothole on the road, I Claude tag the city manager bot, and it's like, hey, okay, I'll come schedule to fix that, and it's done. And so it's the start of this kind of human interaction with an overall AI manager, so to speak, an AI which becomes like this web that weaves human activity together. One could imagine a household management Claude, which manages your kids' schedules, allowances, household finances, like your car insurances, and a bunch of this other stuff. Group purchasing for the household and group purchasing for the enterprise company. The range of activities that this is eventually going to be applied to is very, very large, and it's much greater than those activities which are just single player. Like the single player activities are much more limited than the multiplayer activities. So I think this is the start of a new paradigm, which I think Andre Karpathy rightly points out. And I think people are not really aware of what this is going to lead to. And it's going to look beautiful in a sense, because there's a lot of coordination that happens between people that we use very imperfect tools right now. But that also means, again, a decline in human interaction, because you don't need to necessarily talk to someone to get an appointment anymore. This is going to subsume a bunch of SaaS. It's going to subsume Calendly. This is going to subsume a lot of other. This is going to subsume a lot of meetings in general, right? A lot of meetings in general are context sharing between humans. The AI, Claude Tag is going to have all the context. You can just talk to it directly. You don't need to organize a meeting. Yeah, it's the beginning of a lot of things, and I really do wonder why they launched it now, because I had always thought this was going to be maybe a 2-year thing. We don't have a reliable personal assistant yet. The reliable personal assistant is just kind of getting there with Fable, and this is a reliable multiplayer agent that they are confident about. That speaks to something for me.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a big deal. I mean, my wife is always an interesting example of somebody who uses Claude a lot, but hasn't really integrated it into the systems of her life. And I think I've finally got my setup to the point where I just actually prompted Claude the other day to make a plan to onboard her into my environment so we can have shared agents to help us with household stuff and all that kind of thing. But part of the design constraint there is this needs to be easy for her. She's not going to she's just not inclined to be a tinkerer. She doesn't want to get deep into the Mac OS settings or the permissions on all these different platforms. So I've kind of done all that work. Now she can, come along and hopefully get a lot of benefits from it. This is basically the same thing, right? They've done all that work. And now everybody can just kind of pile in and get the benefits of it. I think it will be a huge deal. There is also this note of initiative. They call it ambient behavior. So it will take initiative if you have ambient behavior enabled and just kind of trawl around your broader team Slack and try to find things that you need to know and help you out. Identify balls that are potentially getting dropped, loose ends that were never tied up, so on and so forth. And that's something I actually do pretty often too. I'll kind of declare bankruptcy on all the tabs that I had and just kind of go to a new Claude and be like, please look at all the recent sessions and identify the ones that I actually need to come back to land the plane on. And so that too is something that, they've clearly observed that a lot of people are just increasingly not able to track all the things that they ideally would be tracking. And this is where an AI that can go process that information in the background, I think can be super useful. So I do have some questions that I don't think have been super answered here around I guess it's only available for teams and enterprise customers. How this gets billed, I think will be kind of interesting. Is it to the user that tagged, presumably? Are they giving you the same, kind of token price advantage that you're getting on your max plan or whatever? And does that change as you go past, I've really been interested recently in this major price cliff that they have at 150 users. This is something I didn't appreciate as much as I should have until recently. Part of the reason the enterprises are complaining about price is past 150 users, you have to pay the API rate.
Yeah.
Whereas under 150 users, you get basically the price discrimination advantage of the individual Max account. So this probably will follow those same conventions, I guess. But it's really a remarkable cliff that they have at 150 users when you go from the subscription token budgets to the API rate. That is a big difference. And so they're price discriminating very effectively, maybe too effectively. We'll see if they have to bring those into somewhat closer alignment or make a little bit more of a tiered gradations of it, or who knows what. But I agree with you. I think it will be a big deal. I think it will mean that a lot of people will be much more able and much sooner to do the kinds of things that folks like you and I have spent the last few months setting up for ourselves.
Yeah, I've almost been like lazy about this because I know it's going to come out in the product. And I stumbled through OpenClaw. OpenClaw didn't treat me well. I then went into Hermes, and I had Codex 5.5, and Codex 5.5 with Hermes was okay. Like, I still had to do a bunch of stuff. I swapped into GLM 5.2 yesterday, and GLM 5.2 inside Hermes, and I told it to do something, and the skill was still in Codex. And GLM 5.2 just, all right, I'm going to go into your Codex and into your Claude skills. I'm going to find all the skills over there, and I'm going to use them. And I just used them. And I'm like, where did you get the skill from? It's like, oh, I went into your Codex folder and .codex folder and found the skill, and I used it. And I'm like, whoa, I didn't tell you to do that. Like, and it just didn't care. It's like, okay, job needs to be done. How would this user have organized? All right, I'm just going to go check. So Hermes with GLM 5.2, I think the Chinese models have a little bit less respect for auth in general, and they're a little bit more like goal focused. And I think some people actually appreciate that. I've heard a lot of people say the same thing about DeepSeek. And GLM 5.2, if you've been following over the last few days, there have been a number of American firms who are basically supporting it and converting full sail to it. Snowflake, a large data lake company, just announced yesterday they're going to support GLM 5.2 in their Cocoa internal agent. Box, Aaron Levy at Box is supporting GLM 5.2. A number of other guys are now using GLM 5.2. And the reasoning is that it is better than GPT 5.5 Codex. It is approaching what they think Fable might have done in many cases, and they find it useful, and it's way, way cheaper. It's 90% cheaper, basically. So this is the state that we're in. I don't know how long this delay at the for licensing that the US is doing is going to be tenable. There's also a talk yesterday. There's one company has not signed on to pre-release testing, and that is Meta. Meta, of all companies, has said that they do not want. They are still negotiating on the pre-release testing. They don't know whether they want to submit to pre-release testing by the US state yet. Which is also interesting because they're not reliant on cash flows, and they're not reliant on permissions from that reliant on permissions, and they have this enormous like consumer industry. No one wants to stop out Instagram. We've seen how much difficulty the US state had with TikTok, which was made in China. Instagram made in the US. You can't just cut people off their Instagram. It's just not going to happen. So I think Meta may have a little bit more power in dealing with federal requirements, which are really extra legal at this point. The U.S. kind of state testing, which is done through an executive order, is really an extra legal licensing, which is not actually in any statute. So let's see what happens with that.
Going back for a second to GLM and its performance, what are you using for inference? Who are you using for inference?
Great question.
And has the advantage primarily been driven by its sort of less cautious nature, or are you seeing other dimensions of improvement that you are excited about?
That is a fantastic question, because I really struggled with inference. And I switched providers multiple times. I started off with OpenRouter, and OpenRouter is basically a central platform that allocates your inference queries to a bunch of other platforms. And OpenRouter was slow, and I found the lag time like slow. So then I switched to one of the inference providers that OpenRouter was using directly. So I switched to I think Together AI. Together AI was also slow and also had dropped queries. So very annoying. So I switched back to Open Router. And then I was like, well, these guys, Base 10, were on the timeline and Twitter, advertising heavily that they had a very fast kind of GLM 5.2 inference. So I switched to Base 10. Oh my God. Yes, they are fast, but they do not respect the JSON schema. And if you've done inference before, the JSON schema basically defines what the model can send to you. So you can tell it, send this to me in text, send the dates to me in this format, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that makes that consumable by your non-AI framework, by your non-AI Python and Node.js tools. They can consume that data. Base 10 does not respect JSON schema. So I'm asking you for a date time in year, month, day format. You send it back to me as June 18th, 2026. And I'm like, what am I supposed to do with that? What is my Python service supposed to do with that? Like it just bounces, right? And then I switched to Cloudflare. So Cloudflare has this thing called Workers AI, where they have a Cloudflare worker with the AI model already set up and warm, and you can send a query to it. Cloudflare AI works much better. There's still some problems with it. It's faster, it's more reliable, but there's also things that they don't tell you about, and which is that it's really configured for 4,000 tokens output. And GLM is a model that can do it's a million token context window with 250,000 tokens output. And so you kind of have to negotiate with Cloudflare and tell it, hey, I want you to 250,000 output tokens and want you to accept the larger size. I want you to send it back as JSON schema to me. So there's a lot of discovery still involved in these things. And if not for Claude and Codex helping me to implement this, I would not have been able to implement GLM5. I wouldn't have had the patience to go and because you have to do basically API discovery. You have to try 2,000 tokens, 4,000 tokens, 10,000 tokens. You got to try the JSON schemas. It's just so annoying. And so I had Codex and Claude set up GLM 5.2 for me, and then GLM 5.2 works now. It's great, and it's very cheap. And not having token anxiety makes you more able to allocate more tasks to it, which is what I love. So
very interesting. So the the current final place is Cloudflare. I'll be interested to see another one that I think would be on the short list to try would be Fireworks. I think they have a pretty good reputation for doing a good job of getting these models launched in a quality way, often on day one. The other thing on token anxiety, and then we'll switch gears and welcome our guest today, is so the price ratio is about 3-to-1 compared to GPT 5.5 Codex, right? So it's $5 per million input with 5.5. It's $1.40 with GLM 5.2, and then it's $30 output versus $4.40 for GLM 5.2. So you've got somewhere in the 3 to 5 price advantage. But I do wonder, is it token efficient? First of all, how token hungry is it? And second, that $200 plan also, don't forget, gives you a 20x multiple on that token budget. So still, it would seem like if you're the kind of person who's going to spend $200, you could still get more from the GPT Pro plan versus what you would be able to get, with that same $200, even from any of the inference providers on GLM 5.2, right?
Right. And not only that, I must be the most stupid person in AI sometimes. I discovered yesterday that you can use Claude and you can have a setting in Claude where you move it to ultra code. And so I just tried Claude ultra code yesterday. It is a marvel because it integrates Anthropic's existing best practices on how to organize subagents in there. and it has workflows, and these workflows define, okay, reviewers and et cetera, all the stuff that you are typically you don't have time to set up on your own, or you have a lot of setup involved. And UltraCode basically manages all of that for you. It sets up like reviewer agents and research agents, and it has workflows that work hand in hand in order to solve your problems. And so this is something that I just discovered yesterday. And so now I find myself like, there's just so many options now, and I get confused myself. And so you are correct that, perhaps on a token basis, on a pure token basis, maybe something else might be better, but I'm still experimenting. I also am fairly, I'm also fairly confused, actually. So it's not as though you can get a completely, non-confused, complete clarity, just from my opinion at this point, I think.
Yeah, well, we're all very much exploring and building this road, just a couple patches of sidewalk in front of us at a time, which is maybe a great transition to our guest. Welcome, Professor David Duvenaud, who is a ML professor at the University of Toronto, was a member of the technical staff at Anthropic for a while, and has, I think, a very provocative and arresting point of view that says, hey, even if we're able to solve a lot of the kind of biggest galaxy brain questions around how do we keep the AIs broadly under control and broadly doing what we want them to do, might we, in all of our kind of myopic tinkering and sort of local decision making, our local optimization processes of how do we get AI to do this for me and how do you get this AI to do that for you, might we collectively be walking ourselves into a not very good situation? And so I think this is a very kind of under theorized and important area. And he's organized a couple of workshops, weekend workshops. One was not too long ago, just a couple of weeks back. I unfortunately couldn't make it, but this is one of the great things of having this AI in the AM platform, is I can occasionally call such a leading light up and get the recap and share with everybody what the big takeaways were from a full weekend of searching for post-AGI civilizational equilibria. So welcome, and we're very excited to hear, or maybe a little scared to hear, what you have been finding in your recent quest.
Thank you, Nathan and Prakash. Nice to be here. So how's my audio, by the way?
You sound great. Thanks for checking.
Wonderful.
David, you had a recent, I think, 2-day session at Lighthaven on what the post-AGI future looks like. Can you just give us kind of the roundup of, what happened there? What was the discussion like? What did the participants kind of, come out of that with?
Yeah, sure. So just to back up a bit, this was our third workshop in this calendar year. And it came from a place of me and some other of my colleagues feeling like there was a lot of people thinking about these issues in a pretty disconnected community and maybe in kind of enclaves. And a lot of AI safety policy and development policy kind of being invisibly depending on some particular vision of the future that maybe wasn't shared or fleshed out, or even very widely understood in the mutual sort of mutual knowledge kind of setting. And bizarrely, I just still didn't and still don't see people talking that much about what do you expect to actually be doing after we solve AGI, especially the people building it. So this is our attempt to kind of get all the people that we thought would be worth getting to talk to each other in one place. So this time, we had a pretty awesome lineup. This time we had Paul Cristiano, who maybe we could consider one of the godfathers of AI safety or big picture thinking. Scott Alexander. Previous workshops we had Joe Carl Smith, Andrew Sandberg, Nick Bostrom, Will McCaskill. We also had a lot of serious people in adjacent fields. So this time we had Helen Toner and Eric Brynjolfsson, and before that we've had Anton Koronek. And we've, whenever a serious intellectual shows or we find out that they kind of take radical change seriously, we're so delighted. We're like, oh my God, finally, another serious person who might have a bunch of a point of view that we don't, who's actually going to engage with us and not say like, well, isn't everything going to be fine, or aren't capabilities going to plateau or something. And by the way, when I say we, I mean so these the three people, or sorry, the other two people who have been co-organizing with me in all three of the workshops is Jan Koolveit and Raymond Douglas, who are also two of my co-authors on the Gradual Disempowerment paper. Me and Ray and Jan have kind of like a similar outlook, but we try really hard to make this like a sort of neutral big tent place where the sort of accelerationists and the quasi-AI people should both feel comfortable laying out their case in a kind of like scholarly, let's talk to each other kind of situation. I also want to mention, we try really hard to get all the like weirdos who we respect. And like probably that's my favorite part about the workshop, is giving a platform to people who are like not necessarily part of a normal institution, or like going about their intellectual progress in a normal way. So, I mean, I hope they don't mind that I call them weirdos. I think they all understand that we totally love and respect them. So like Richard No, Riffosaurus, Janus was a speaker at our recent workshop. You know, the anonymous...
The impossible podcast guest.
The impossible podcast guest, exactly. Ivan Vendroff, Baron Millage, just people who have been just on their own trying to make progress in this sort of like non-existent field. And so I just like have so much respect for these people for like making something out of nothing here. And then of course we try to engage with the professionals. Like, so last time we had Kunal Handa from the Anthropic Societal Impacts, Jacob Steinhardt, Stephen Casper, Jason Gabriel and Sasha Vejnevets from DeepMind, Seb Krier, Buck Shulgaris. And I guess we always try to sort of get them to answer harder versions of the questions that they're answering in their professional life. Like I think a lot of the professionals end up kind of talking about a lot of near-term stuff. And I always want to bait them into being, okay, but like, what about 1 year later? What about one round more of human irrelevance later, or something like that? And get, kind of, not exactly hold their feet to the fire, but like make sure that the obvious rebuttals are being addressed. So that's just like a rough idea of what happened. Maybe, do you guys, that was a kind of a lot of information. Do you want to just ask a more specific question next?
Yeah, can we do just one baseline case? I mean, I tried to do like a very short version in my intro of you, but what's the like level set on gradual disempowerment? How do you kind of present the baseline? This is something we should worry about, and then we can, unpack, possible different solutions, reasons that it maybe shouldn't be something we should worry about, et cetera, et cetera. But just kind of give us the mainline narrative first, so we know what the point of departure is.
Sure. So I think a lot of people gestured towards this when they said, "Oh, I'm worried about concentration of power," or "I'm worried about not being the most competitive species on Earth." Like very intuitive arguments about, "Hey, we're not going to be on top because we're not going to be competitive." And then I think there was sort of this sophisticated, or at least response to this, which was, "No, it'll be fine because we'll have AI to help us." Like when I talk to people at the major labs, including, they would say something like, "Well, sure. Like in a normal world, we might not be fine. But hey, some people just have an intuition that the government is going to step in and make sure everyone's fine. Mm-hmm. Other people have an intuition that if everybody has an AI advisor helping them solve coordination problems, that will be well represented in whatever power struggle occurs." Mm-hmm. And my basic rebuttal to that is like, well, the optimization process of like civilization or competition or techno capital or whatever, like people have different ways of ascribing agency to the emergent sort of allocation of resources towards growth that happens. Mm-hmm. Is just going to always be working against us, and we'll always be fighting the current because we will be drags on growth. We will have AIs that represent us, but these emerging growth centers that might not be aligned to humans will also have AIs helping them solve coordination problems and maybe crush dissent. Yeah.
Sorry, what do you mean by growth? Like as in economic growth, or?
I basically mean economic growth. I mean, it's kind of funny because we only really have a good vocabulary for economic growth, but like population growth is almost the same thing. And especially when you have AIs that are both sort of population and capital, it kind of merges. I mean, and then again, like think of like factories and power plants and robots, like anything that kind of can affect matter and cause there to be more growth. Like just to stop here, one intuition that a lot of people have is like, but surely human desires or consumption or something is always going to be what matters, and surely any corporation or government that we build is going to be like ultimately sort of the shots would be being called by a human, and it just makes me think of like some monkeys, and they're like trading bananas amongst each other, and they see humans start to like build their city, and they're like, oh wow, like we could probably trade with those humans and get rich. But of course, ultimately, what matters is the banana monkey economy, and it might be hard to measure GDP if we don't count the human activity, but ultimately, it's going to be the monkeys that are calling the shots because they're going to need to trade with us for bananas, and it's just like people just don't understand that they might be irrelevant someday as like consumers or producers, and there can just be it's just not that hard for there to be self-contained sources of growth that just don't have to answer to any particular human desire. And I mean, governments is the classic one, right? Like the North Koreans never were like, hey, let's all get together and make a horrible system of government that oppresses us. And I don't think that like the Kims either were like, oh yeah, let's make this like horrible equilibrium. It just kind of happened. Same with like the USSR, same with like all kinds of states throughout history. It's just so easy for you to accidentally build a layer of agency on top of you that doesn't actually care about you. It cares about growth and power just emergently.
One of the things that I struggle with is that this idea that money, for example, is something which is only valuable to humans. Like you can't take $1 and show it to a monkey, or you can't take a dollar isn't that is only a dollar is a system of creating movement in the financial world that is only important to humanity, correct?
No,
so
no, I don't agree with that.
You
can trade with monkeys, and they learn how to use money
right.
pretty fast. And AIs can use money to buy more compute, which is like their lifeblood.
I agree that AIs will use money to buy compute, but the fundamental fact is just like a group of nerds gave value to Bitcoin by basically memeing that Bitcoin was worth something to other nerds. It is. For me, I think that the idea of the dollar is intrinsically linked with human desires and human capital. And it's a dollar only motivates a human to do something. We are telling the AIs basically that, hey, if you produce dollars, we will do stuff for you. And so we are encouraging them to produce dollars. And as a result, they may also trade with each other in that dollar economy, but it's primarily an economy which is determined by value to humanity, correct?
No, not at all. I mean, and the quintessential thing that's driven by lust for dollars is corporations and also governments. And like money is just a way of making promises to each other. And so AIs could use money, or they could just have their own informal reputation system or their blockchain, whatever. It doesn't really matter. There's nothing human about money, I would say.
I can kind of see where you're going with that. But as you pointed out, they could also just use a reputation system. For example, if you see countries, for example, sovereigns, when sovereigns deal with each other, there is money, but there's also the fact that a lot of the money is fiat dollars. And so they end up with an underlying, perhaps a gold standard, or even an underlying standard of violence almost, because they have the ability to express, military goals and military power, which we're kind of seeing in Russia and Iran and other places right now. And that military power is not amenable to just cash. Like you can't just, they just don't trade cash for, military might that easily. That's not that easy a trade to make, because there's other things about, control that having that power over violence gives you. And so I feel like you have these underlying other currencies, like you have the currency of violence, and then you have the currency of, dollars. And the dollars are only useful to the extent that you don't use the violence, because once you use the violence, the dollars are meaningless, basically, right? And so I think there's these like levels of currencies that you deal with, and the currency that you have between humans is basically dollars. Perhaps between AI it will be energy or compute. It strikes me that, if you have a system that is focused on producing growth, economic growth through the growth of dollars, that is going to be something that is automatically beneficial to humanity, because humanity kind of determines what is valued with those dollars.
Yeah, and I guess I'm saying I don't understand why we're even talking about dollars. Like, again, we could just talk about, as you said, like energy or number of robot factories or something like that. And so like, again, right now when we interface with other beings, we have to make promises. We do that through money. But like, again, I don't understand why, therefore, it has to ultimately benefit, their growth has to ultimately benefit humans in the same way that human growth doesn't have to benefit monkeys, even if we trade them for bananas sometimes.
Well,
Can I try?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, okay. So I think that one struggle I have with this is I sort of feel the intuition somewhat, but not maybe 100%. You know, and I'm kind of like, okay, the premise, right, is, and you're not saying that we should take this for granted, to be clear, but like the premise of the gradual disempowerment line of reasoning is no hard left turns, you know, no big crazy AI takeovers, no like, you know, massive scheming on the AI's part. They're broadly aligned. They're broadly doing what we're telling them to do. And still somehow through a gradual process of like, give them control over this, have them run this factory over here. Actually, you know, maybe they should do some of these international negotiations because they tend to do a better job at that. We gradually end up in a spot where the AIs are doing all the stuff, or, you know, the large lion's share of the stuff. And then so far it's like, that could be pretty good, right? And this is maybe the Machines of Loving Grace version. But then there's one extra intuition that's like, actually, we might not be that happy with that situation. And I think that's where maybe a lot of people kind of are struggling to understand exactly what leap you are making there.
Sure.
And I'm like sort of half on how, so, you know, it depends on which side of the bed I wake up in the morning, whether I feel like, it'll probably be fine, or no way that'll be fine. You know, we're going to end up screwed.
Yeah. So I'm glad that you gave me that portrayal, because I actually disagree with some of it, and I think it's missing a big piece. So first of all, I'll say the thing that I'm worried about is starvation. Like whether like us all feeling like we don't have meaningful jobs or whatever, like that's not a serious problem in my point of view, compared to literally not being able to eat enough, or maybe like being forced to be uploaded so that you have a much smaller footprint, but then also on like very unfavorable terms, so that you don't get to choose when you run, and maybe you just only get trotted out for special occasions or never. Who knows? I kind of think that's what like like sort of like the slowest possible starvation looks like. So again, so the reason people aren't happy is because they can see that there is a agency that's maybe like government or some other like giant thing that doesn't particularly care about their welfare. It cares much more about some other types of beings' welfare.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing they can do about this. And of course, if humans are still making decisions, then maybe there's some things they can do, but I don't actually think that's the crux of the matter. I think not being needed as producers is sort of the important part. And maybe here's a thing to give you intuition. So imagine I'm a North Korean farmer or soldier,
Mm-hmm.
and tomorrow Kim Jong-il, I think that's the current leader, is like replaced by a robot or like an LLM or something. Then I'm like, I don't know if that's good or bad. Like maybe the LLM is going to be nicer, maybe it's not. But like ultimately, they still need me to like farm to run the state or whatever. But if tomorrow we keep the same human leader, but now there's suddenly like robot farmers and robot soldiers, and you realize that now the state doesn't actually need you, I would be much more scared of the second state of affairs.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other intuition I want to give is that humans are not going to be the most competitive thing by whatever standards there are for the state to give out goodies or like UBI or whatever like post-scarcity stuff. Like I guess I'll say, I think post-scarcity is like a sort of nonsense term, and people should think of it as like temporary abundance that will soon be eaten by whatever growth manages to, like, you know, whoever manages to have the most babies or build the most robot factories or reproduce the fastest. And whatever it is that like the formula is for giving out UBI, machines are going to be better at optimizing that formula than humans because they can adapt faster. And so I don't really know exactly what the state's going to care about, but whatever it is, like, it's going to seem criminally decadent to spend whatever UBI on like a few humans when you could be simulating like millions of ultra blissful and politically correct and up-to-date, like more deserving beings than these like backwards bitter clinger humans who are just like, parasites of the state or something like that. So that's the situation I kind of expect us to be in, as you say, even if we solve alignment.
I'm gonna throw a little bit of a curveball, because I've always found the UBI concept to be a left-wing socialist concept, and I'm gonna give you what the right-wing, more capitalist viewpoint will be. The right-wing capitalist viewpoint will be universal basic credit, and in the sense that anyone can borrow as much as they want, and you have a negative interest rate because you're going through deflation. So you have negative interest rate. And so people with money are going to be pushing credit on you. And then this sounds a lot like the current US economy. And there's a reason for that, because you can think of China as basically like the production entity and the US as the consumption entity. And you can think of the Chinese as basically the robotic producers who are pumping product into the US consumer, and the US consumer as extracting credit from the Chinese state and basically deploying. And this is actually a system that already exists today, where we have a consumption entity which in the US and a production entity in China, and you have this flow of credit basically where the Chinese are putting credit, and that is why the US has this enormous kind of borrowing, trade deficit, all of that stuff. That entire structure already exists today. And so you could think of a state called the robotic state, and the robotic state basically is going to do the same thing. It's going to produce everything, and then it's going to trade with the human state, and it's going to extend credit to the human state in order that the human state may buy it. And the human state leaders are going to allocate that credit through banking and through consumer credit to their consumers. And you could basically have this system already exists today. And we do not actually need a universal basic income. You can basically just extend the system a little bit, and you can have a negative interest rate, and you can have deflation. And you don't need you also don't need a negative interest rate. You just need a negative real interest rate. So you can still have inflation in there as well. So all of this stuff already kind of exists today. And if you wanted a sleepwalking path where you don't actually need to make any new laws or any new policy, this is basically what I think is already kind of happening. And especially as the Chinese are actually much more forward on automating their factories right now. So they are actually moving into robots much, much faster than the US is. And so you already have this kind of emerging out of thin air.
Well, I'm a little bit confused about this, where you're saying that the capital holders somehow gain something by giving capital or lending to unemployable humans. Like, what are the humans doing with that is going to make it attractive to give them a loan?
So this is the really funny part. I'm still wondering why the Chinese are extending credit to the US. And it's actually exactly similar in the sense that in order to have customers to buy your product, you basically have to lend to your customers.
Well, but I'm saying that again, it's like, oh man, what if we kill all the monkeys? How are we going to have a human economy without being able to sell bananas to monkeys? It's like, we don't need them. We don't need them as producers or consumers. And I think humans are going to be in the same situation. I think it makes a lot of sense to lend to the US when it's like the engine of techno capital, and it's like clearly going to be like a giant source of wealth and power going forward. And I'm saying humans are going to be the exact opposite of that. It would be like giving money to like an insect or like, I don't know, a fetus or something. Like it's not going to be able to do anything with it that you wouldn't be able to do better yourself.
Well, besides 2 or 3 countries in the world, most countries run on a deficit and actually are net borrowers. There's only like 5 countries in the world which are net lenders in the global economy. Everyone else is borrowing. And every other country, every government runs basically a deficit. There's only 5 countries that basically run a surplus. So in effect, it's not just the techno-capital leader in the US, but India and all of Africa and all these countries and all of Latin America, they're all borrowers. Everyone else is a borrower.
Okay, but I guess all I'm trying to say is that borrowing and lending between different sources of competitive growth makes sense under all sorts of circumstances.
Yeah.
If there's just the unemployable guy who's just going to use it to smoke weed, there's just no conceivable way where investing in that guy helps, and we're going to be that guy.
The funny thing is, I have been in consumer credit, and people do this all the time. It's not visible to us as middle-class consumers, but there's an entire rung of check cashing, payday lending, all of this stuff at the bottom rung. And it's an enormous business in the US. All of, let's say, Square, right? Square as a company, the bulk of its profits actually come from these kind of payday-ish loans where they're charging 5% a week or so. Afterpay and all of these things where you can pay in installments over 4 weeks. That's an enormous business. These are all businesses which are basically lending to consumers who do not have good credit. And who are basically in that range.
It's a payday loan. They're only giving credit to people who have income and are producing. So that's what I'm saying is when no one has a payday, then there's not going to be any more payday loans or anything like that.
uh, in
So I'm
the
gonna try
US,
one
the
analogy.
bottom 40%, the bottom 40% are basically in that range where they are surviving check to check, payday to payday. And
Well,
we,
no, not the bottom. Like, there's like these people who are employable. Then there's
yeah.
people below them who are actually unemployed. They're not getting payday loans because it doesn't make any sense. So again, that's what I'm saying is going to grow.
So there is lending on top of food stamps. It's illegal, but it happens. The
Uh-oh.
Hello? Can you hear
Hello.
me?
I can hear you, but I don't see Prakash anymore.
We vibe coded this studio, and we still have a couple little small issues with it from time to time. He vibe coded the studio. I should give credit where it's due. I was going to try an analogy, which I'm usually not a big analogy guy, but in terms of this intuition of, I guess there's kind of two ideas I'm processing at the same time. One is, do we see an example of this in the China shock, where it seems like we have a lot of people in the United States who, through a process of local optimization, have been quite significantly disempowered and, I think by their own description, like made worse off because there was a more efficient way to get what they were contributing to the economy done. And so we closed the factories, shipped them to China. We got cheaper stuff back, but they are not happy with that situation. And certainly our politics reflects that. And they don't have a lot of agency over it, right? I mean, excuse me. They still have some ability to vote, but it doesn't seem like we're going to vote our way out of the kind of macro structure that we have where China's the big producer. And so it does feel like there's somewhat of an analogy there.
I love this analogy, and I think it, especially because of the cultural aspect, where I think to some extent the cultural disempowerment followed the economic disempowerment. And like the Midwest, I don't know, I guess I feel like when I was a kid, it was just like, oh yeah, there's this area where it's kind of like very rural and there's lots of factories and unions and farmers or whatever. And now it's like, oh, there's this horrible wasteland of like racist, backward people who are like, bitter and hate everything that's sensible and vote against their own interests and need to be kept in line. At least like that's like on the coast, that's kind of like, having lived there for a while, like that's kind of the vibe I got. And I think it's not slam dunk that that's the exact order, but I guess I'm saying I kind of expect something similar to happen is like, first the humans become economically irrelevant, then it becomes just so easy and again, like growth promoting to demonize them and then marginalize them. I realize it's more complicated than that. And we have like major exceptions. And maybe people still will be able to vote their way out of it, right? Like it's not totally obvious, but this is sort of like the winds we'll have to push against.
I can kind of see that. I can kind of see the China shock that happened, and you had that period. But you've also had this period of human flourishing after China entered the global economy, and you had this kind of catch up while the Chinese caught up, and then you have all of these new products, right? All of these new batteries and all of this other stuff, which has made life better. And now they're entering into biotech, and so you're getting biotech innovation from China. You're getting cancer drugs from China. So I feel like, yes, we went through that, but maybe we already found a way around it. I don't know.
Maybe I will agree.
Well,
that
they are humans, which is one thing we should always keep in mind as a key fact in this analysis.
Yeah, but I just think it's absolutely the case that despite rising tide lifting all boats and giving people better medicines or whatever, like it can also absolutely be the case that your local community is just wiped out economically and then just marginalized politically, and you're worse off, at least in the short run. Like, I think it's a reasonable pushback to say enough growth solves everything. And I think that is like a reasonable thesis to have, but I just don't think it's obvious. And I think there's all kinds of groups and species and like tribes that have just been wiped out by the other tribe that grows faster and then dominates them.
Yeah, the history of things going extinct, species and cultures, is definitely one that I highlight often to people who think everything's going to be fine. It's like the historical record does show that for plenty of groups at plenty of different points in time, things were not, in fact, going to be fine. One other kind of intuition builder or tester, and then I think we should maybe switch gears and kind of stop fighting the hypothetical and then get into like, okay, if we take this premise, where do we go from there? What options are people considering? But one more before we do that is this notion of comparative advantage. We often hear, well, sure, maybe the machines, I think Noah has kind of come off of this a little bit recently. But a little while back, I had a discussion with Noah Smith where he was basically like, the law of comparative advantage means that even if machines are better at everything, there is still going to be things that it makes more sense to pay a human to do because the machines will be better off doing their specialized things. And so we'll have our role and we'll have, that'll be enough for us to preserve some market power and some, ability to trade. I said horses too sometimes. Like the number of horses is definitely way down. And it's basically now a leisure activity. But how do you answer in sort of, principled terms, this comparative advantage argument? And then you might also want to highlight any other kind of most powerful or most kind of theoretically viable counter arguments that you get and how you answer those. And then we'll go to the future.
Yeah. So I think that is a great counter argument. And people point out that we've already lost 99% of all jobs in that like agriculture used to be almost everyone's job. And now that's like 1% of the jobs. And so I definitely concede that losing 99% of the jobs again would actually probably be fine. And it would probably look like this awesome utopia that everyone talks about. So as long as there's like some niche where you just really need humans and it's like a substantial fraction of humans and you can't really tell exactly ahead of time who it's going to be, then we're probably kind of like still going to be able to be like treated as a source of growth. And that would be awesome. And then like, to the moon, like let's do it. And I guess, so I guess one cruxy claim that I stand by is that we will actually be able to eliminate like 99.99999, like really just anything, let's just say 100%, just for like to keep things simple. And then that is going to be disastrous. And the comparative advantage people will say, well, no, automating a job is a matter of degree. As long as there's still something which you're like comparatively less worse at than the machine, even if you're worse at everything, you'll still have a job. And then I have to just say, like, think about the transaction costs. Think about how easy it is for someone to be unemployable today, even if they have like an occasional drug habit, or like they just have like a stroke or like they have a fainting condition or something. It's so easy to be unreliable enough that it's not worth employing you. So certainly for anything important, you can easily imagine that having like a human surgeon or a human politician or something is going to seem like this irresponsible thing. Like it's like take your kid to work day and it's like a surgeon. It's like, no. Like, why would I involve a human in this when we have the like
human cab driver?
Yeah, we have the machine that everyone has been working with for thousands of years, and we know it's like reliable, and and if there's a problem, we fix it once and it's solved for all time. We don't have to like retrain every airline pilot or whatever. So for anything important where the human could make a mistake and it could cause some problem, I think it's intuitive that like, okay, yes, I can see how we just want the machine for that. And now you have to sort of retreat to like weird relational stuff. I do think there's a case to be made that there will just be a lot of humans that just really want the actual real human thing. And I think more people than you expect will end up liking the machine replacement better than the human. But I can see that there are at least some people that are just like, I just really want the human thing. And then we have to talk about, okay, there's going to be this sort of self-contained cycle of consumption between humans that's not necessarily going to be providing any value to this larger machine economy. And so then there's this question of like, can they like index the growth of that economy to live good lives forever? I think it's plausible that they could. I think it would be really hard. I think a lot of things are going to be working against them by default. So I guess all I'm trying to say is that I think it's plausible that everything is set up just right, then the humans could live in their like endless cycle of consumption and work for each other. And I just think that's a very unstable situation.
Yeah, so unstable equilibrium, I think, is maybe the answer to this next question too, and hopefully this kind of provides you a jumping off point into some of the future scenarios, analyses from the workshop. But then so I think it's a very powerful point to say we have existence proofs of adult humans, able-bodied, not terribly unintelligent. And yet, for any number of reasons, they might still be unemployable today. Like Okay, wow. Yeah, that's true, actually. There's quite a few of them. Um, we broadly don't let them starve outright, right? So, like, one other thing I would expect people to sort of say is like, well, maybe we'll be unemployable, but maybe that'll be okay. We'll have this sort of, especially if we're assuming, for the sake of analysis, that we've done okay on alignment, then they'll be nice to us, even in that situation. And then this, I think, raises the question of like, yeah, but for how long and under what circumstances, and what might cause that to change once we are not able to push back on on the whatever direction the sort of broader machine starts to take.
Yeah, exactly. So I think you're right that we won't let people starve for a long time. And this is where things start to get a little bit out there, in the sense that a whole bunch of things are going to have changed a lot before what I'm worried about is going to happen.
Mhm. Mhm.
Namely, there's going to be some new source of growth, probably just combinations of like power plants, robot factories, robotic mining facilities, whatever it takes to make like some self-contained cycle of building more and tiling the earth with factories. And now we enter some sort of new Malthusian era. And of course, I think you rightly should say, you sound like, what's the guy, Paul Ehrlich, who was like, oh, let's like sterilize people. Like, overpopulation is obviously the problem. And these guys were always wrong in the past. And I just want to fully acknowledge that. And like, it's just so easy to overcall. But even counting for that, my inside view is that, yes, Malthusian limits are kind of like the natural equilibria that we'll end up in. And that's when you start having to make a choice between, again, like feed the economically useless and morally reprehensible, according to whatever like future standards that we have, humans, or feed 1,000 times as many much more virtuous and productive beings. And that's when we'll start to let people starve. And when I say we, I mean like whatever like process of optimization is actually like emergently running our civilization. So like one way, like I think Andrew Kush talks about this, like just pollution, right? It could be that there's a whole bunch of factories increasing the temperature of the earth, and it just becomes less viable to like grow crops and like live as a human on earth, not by anyone choosing to like kill the humans, but just like not spending that much time making their habitats acceptable to them.
I will just
destruction.
I would just put
that's our main lever. Yeah, go ahead, Prakash.
Which is that the Paul Ehrlich thing has not only been proven, with the Simon bet, but also that Amartya Sen wrote a book where he found that famines were primarily caused by information issues on leadership not knowing where and when to deliver food to. And so this is the reason why famines are much rarer in democracies, because in democracies, people are allowed to talk. And when you can shout that you're hungry, leadership knows that you're hungry and they can reallocate food supply. A lot of starvation and famines are caused by like not being able to allocate the right amount of food in the right place, and less that the production was not sufficient.
Sure. I mean, well, first I'll say, like, yes, again, we should be really careful not to overcall this, because it's like people have made this mistake many times before. I will say those are like historical analogies. I think a lot of things are going to be different between those situations and the ones I'm worried about. But as for like saying like, help, I need more resources, that's one thing that I expect to change also, is that like right now I can just like hold up my like starving kid, and like definitely there's gonna be a whole bunch of people that are gonna be like, oh my God, get this kid some more resources. And but I think as time goes on, there's going to be more optimization of like to exploit these resource sources. And like I don't know if it's going to be like actually literally baby factories, or just more like machines sort of impersonating humans, or like there's all sorts of like weird hybrids you can have between machine entities and humans. But I guess I'm saying this is unstable in the sense that like once we can learn to reproduce faster, I can make 10,000 babies and be like, oh no, all my babies are starving, please feed them. And then like the government takes them and puts them in orphanages, and then they make another 10,000 babies. And you might say people aren't going to do that, and I would be like, yes, but it only takes like one guy to do this. And like I'm pretty sure there's like at least like 1,000 people who would do this if they could.
Yeah, you also have the incredibly low cost of copying the machines themselves, right? So I mean, I think this is another paradigm breaker where it's like we might have baby factories, who knows what we'll be able to do in terms of accelerating our own reproduction, but the cost of copying AI entities is so vanishingly small.
Well, condition on there being data centers for them to live in. So that's why I'm talking about the like the data centers and factories, because that's the real like unit of reproduction. Like within them, yes, you can reproduce faster, but like there's still like a limited amount that you can run.
What if is, as Elon has his own plan of like data centers in space, and especially moving a lot of and Jeff Bezos also has this idea of industrialization in space rather than on Earth. In fact, when I've spoken to Tom Mueller at SpaceX, who was one of the early employees there, it's on the roadmap to do asteroid mining as well, because they can't support the data center growth and the resource growth that is going to be required. And so you're already seeing basically the requirements of permitting on Earth are going to drive the data centers off Earth. So does that make a difference in your kind of outlook, because the resource production is going to be primarily off Earth anyway?
Maybe. I guess I'll say, to me, this is like the beauty of like techno-capital emergent optimization. It's like if it turns out to be sufficiently hard to stop people from like blowing up data centers, then everything will just move into orbit. And so it's just like whether or not, like, I guess what I'll say is, it just goes to show how much you have to control if you don't want there to be explosive sources of growth. You can't let someone make like a Mars colony, because then eventually they're going to decide like, oh, I'm going to build my like recursive self-improvement thing on Mars. It's really, this is the horrifying thing, is like, I'm definitely like a live and let live, like sort of libertarian kind of guy. And then I'm just like, oh crap, that's an awesome policy to have when you're competitive. And when you're not, then like, you're just basically saying like, please, get so big that you can crush me. And I don't want to crush all innovation and growth, but I guess I'm trying to say, as you say, there's just so many ways around any particular attempt to control growth that like you kind of have to control everything to stop it.
So what are people bringing forward now to try to answer this challenge? Like you named, some luminaries at the top. What are some of the most interesting ideas? I guess the core premise that we're working from, it seems, is in a future where humanity is not competitive, how do we avoid a disastrous outcome? Is that a good one sentence question?
Yeah, I'll say that the scope of the workshop was just post-AGI civilizational equilibria period. And I guess maybe, though, I think most of the people think it's like, okay, if it's not aligned, then it's like there's no, the equilibrium is machines kill us all and we're done for, or something. So implicitly the premise was kind of like, and we had some sort of handle on alignment, or things didn't run out of control too quickly. Yes.
So we're in a future where humans are not competitive, but alignment mostly went well. How do we avoid disastrous outcomes? So what are some of the interesting answers that people floated for consideration?
Sure. So first of all, I'll say this all was Chatham House rules, and also like some of the speakers asked for the talks not to be recorded. So I'm not going to attribute, some of this stuff is from speakers, some of it's from like breakouts, and so I'm not going to say who said what. But some people were trying to sketch out like, okay, if a whole bunch of stuff goes well and things are under control, we can imagine something like Earth is preserved as a slow zone, where there's all sorts of restrictions on AIs and even on reproduction and on optimizing human behavior. That's like not allowed. You're not allowed to like think about how to get someone to do something if you're an AI, because then you're going to be able to control the humans, even just through like advertising or whatever it may be. And trying to think through like what are all the different things you would have to do to have such an outcome. How would people be spending their time? And like I don't want to say it sounds silly, but it sounds funny, because the situations where there is AI and they're not, the humans are still mattering, is like all the AIs are sitting there with like their trillions of megawatts of compute running all the time, and sort of just like waiting for the humans to decide that they want something. And the machines are either not allowed to anticipate what they want, or like if they can't anticipate it, still just pretend that they don't know. And so it'd be kind of like as if like, the humans, they looked at like some gorillas as like the new world leaders, and they're like, okay, let's just like give them everything they want, pamper them, and just wait until they like sort out themselves and figure out what to ask for. Like it's not impossible. It's just trying to think through all the things that would have to change and line up is like pretty rough. And basically when you get serious people thinking this through, they end up with this long list of things that have to be banned. Like, okay, we have to have like, an end child policy where everyone can only have a certain number of children. again, you can't be doing like building your own AIs. The AIs can't be optimizing culture too hard because then they could just like take over culturally. And I feel like this is one of the big empirical questions that I want more people to think about is like, if you want some sort of stability, what are all the sources of adaptation and innovation and growth that you have to control? Because I think it's like longer than is intuitive. And it's actually, I think it's kind of like a Pareto friend. It's like how much intellectual activity and optimization do you have to ban before to get to buy like X years of life kind of as it currently is. So I think it's actually like a really horrifyingly strong trade-off. And we would have to right off the bat give up so much stuff that we feel like makes our lives rich. Like, hey, we're just trying to figure out some new stuff. We're doing research, we're doing innovation, we're doing startups. Like all that just like immediately has to be banned from like day one if you want not to just, again, reinvent some like RSI kind of runaway growth center. So I guess that in terms of like equilibria that people are proposing, that there was a couple along those lines where they're just like, how do we steer such that we're controlling all the sources of growth? And it's like super like delicate.
So that's Earth as the slow zone where AI is permitted to go to the stars, but some of us stay here and try to have kind of a recognizable life that, and I guess the upshot of what you're saying is it turns out that to do that, or the best thinking available suggests that to do that, you have to really wall off a whole lot of things, and you're really trying to kind of preserve in amber, so to speak, the current moment. And it kind of, and help me understand a little bit better the intuition that if one of so many different kinds of things changes, that the whole thing unravels. Like I hear you on sort of, okay, we probably can't have recursive self-improvement set off all over the place. So if we want to keep human life recognizable, and we know that this RSI process will lead to a non-competitive state for humans, then we can't open that door many times. But why I guess I also kind of get the like, if you can have a zillion babies, in a sort of manufactured way, then that also could cause problems. How many of those things are there though? Like why, why is it such a long list instead of a short list?
Well, I guess it's just like, it's kind of like optimization in high dimensional space, right? Like we like to have many parameters in our models because it just makes it easier for there to be a way around any problem. And it's kind of like, given the richness of how just complicated life is, there's just always going to be a way for like life finds a way. And it's like growth finds a way. Like my favorite example is maybe just like the Roman Empire and then Christianity coming and just being this like new power center that somehow took over mimetically. And there was armies to prevent people from invading, but there wasn't any like well, there sort of was, but there wasn't like a well-developed like mimetics chancellor who was like, oh crap, we have to like get a handle on this new form of mimetics. And I mean, even with like in giant bureaucracies like the USSR, there ends up being this like whole sort of like subculture that develops for like allocating resources internally that becomes kind of like cancerous. So yeah, maybe cancer is a good example where it's like, wait, isn't there just like these like 10 genes that cause cancer, and if we like get a handle on them, it's like no, there's like sort of infinitely many sets of mutations that could ultimately cause cancer. And it even becomes hard, like a matter of taste, what is cancer at the edges of this? So that's kind of like the analogy, I think.
Just what were the post-AGI futures that looked positive? I mean, were there any post-AGI futures that were discussed that were, positive for humanity? And what were they?
Well, the one I'm mentioning, I feel like was the closest one. Let me just
Which is preserving the Earth as a slow zone in amber almost.
Yeah, I guess one thing I want to call out is in the previous workshop, Richard Ngo had this talk called Living in an Extremely Unequal World. And he was saying, hey, right now everything we're thinking about is optimized for this sort of like peer-to-peer world. And that's just this kind of weird historical aberration. In the future, there's going to be things that are much more like parents or like masters of a pet, or like we do have some positive examples of unequal relationships in our current civilization. And we should be thinking a lot more about like what good version of those could look like in the future, because this idea of like, we're just all going to have our own opinions and resources and just kind of like trade with each other on each own terms, like doesn't really scale to this weird future. And then he didn't lay out any concrete world in which this was the case, but like I thought that was like a cool axis of like, okay, yeah, that is like one direction that we could go in, is like being more okay with being part of some hierarchy that is just much more capable and agentic than us.
I is there an analogy to the financial disempowerment that happened over the course of the 20th century? Because at the beginning of the 20th century, you had this idea that you could have a central bank and you could control your dollar and you could control all of these things. And then you had, China kind of like, okay, we're going to have this command economy. The USSR, you're going to have this command economy. And the US kind of like, okay, we're going to have a market economy where you're going to have individual actors kind of deciding all these prices and things, et cetera, et cetera. And then you had this kind of A/B test of the two models, and the command economies did not work. And as a result, Deng Xiaoping comes along. 10 years later, the USSR falls. Everyone is effectively in a market economy now. And you can kind of see this as kind of a form of disempowerment of the state. The state used to have the power to determine prices, and then prices of airline tickets and prices of food and prices of all of these things. And the state then found that this was not positive for human flourishing, and not a good idea. And even though the China and the USSR fought about, the state fought this idea of relinquishing power to the market, over time it did end up relinquishing, and that was actually a net positive for human empowerment. So can you kind of see that kind of analogy happen as perhaps we lose control of our information sphere in this sense?
Maybe. So I guess I'll say that is sort of a positive example, and maybe the sort of like ecological view of like, there's so many niches, and like, it's not like there's one animal that just like, or one sort of bacteria that just like ate the whole earth like Ragu style. And so maybe we should expect the future to be like rich enough that there's all sorts of niches for all sorts of beings. But I will say, the companies that gained power in that sort of capitalist free form or revolution were competitive, sort of almost by definition. They were like smart, connected, healthy, agentic people who you wanted to do trade with because they were better than their competitors. And so I guess I'm trying to say, like, that as long as we allow liberalism to continue and we're not competitive, then we're not going to, like, however things check out, whether it's like in the political economy of a sort of like communist state or just the decentralized economy of a capitalist state, we're just not going to come out on top as individual actors.
Does that really matter if humans still flourish? I mean, if we like, is the control that important if humanity continues to flourish?
Yeah. So that's a great intuition, and maybe this is to me the biggest thing that I think people are miscalibrated about. They're like, well, capitalism, communism, competitive, not competitive. I'm probably still going to be able to eat, and my kids are going to go to school, and like I'll be able to reproduce, and it's sort of okay. Yeah. And I guess I'll say that has been the case for most of human history. And it's like, doesn't matter if tomorrow like someone invades Canada, like they're still going to need most of everyone I know to like work and be happy and healthy enough to like reproduce and like stick around. So the stakes have been really low for governance this whole time, and it doesn't feel like it, right? Like we obviously spend a ton of time arguing about it, but in a real sense, it's been like very low because we don't actually expect the state to like liquidate most of its citizens. That's only happened like maybe like 2 or 3 times in like the 21st century or the 20th century. And I guess I'm saying that's going to change, and like we've been governing on easy mode, and it actually will matter, and because there really will be again a real risk of starvation if we don't end up on top in whatever competitive political or real economy. And again, that's the crux. Like if you don't think that's the case, then I agree with you. Like let's let growth make us all richer. It's fine.
Starvation is hard for me because we produce so much more than basic food now. Like the food economy is perhaps, less than 1% of our total economic output is food at this point. So it's hard for me to imagine the economy growing, 10x or 100x, and you won't even need that much food. You're not going to need to feed the robots. Well, so the percentage of that food is just the percentage of economy that's devoted to food is just tiny.
So I do agree that growth has massively outpaced our population growth. And I guess the thing that is weird about the modern moment is that population growth hasn't kept up with economic growth and like food growth, as you say. So the thing is that we will have to feed the robots. Like this is kind of a funny thing where sometimes it seems like, well, they eat like electricity and we eat food, 2 separate magisteria. But it's like, no, you can definitely trade one for the other. You can tile a field with solar panels or with wheat. And like, it's a really kind of zero-sum thing at some point. Again, like I say zero sum, like obviously we'll be able to like have like, tons of nuclear reactors tiling the earth and produce like basically infinite food. The question is like, yeah, who wins the distribution politics? And I'm saying we'll also be worse at politics.
One other kind of half-baked, perhaps positive vision that I've heard is the one that Elon puts forward when he tries to motivate Neuralink. Obviously, there's local good that comes out of it in terms of helping quadriplegics and so on, and I don't mean to minimize that. But his stated motivation is to allow humanity to go along for the ride with the AIs. And I wonder if there's some sort of hybrid or merge type scenario. I mean, obviously neurons are a lot slower than than our latest GPUs in some sense, and the speed mismatch may be a real problem for us at some point. But did anyone in your workshop try to develop an idea of some sort of biotechno hybrid form that we might find unrecognizable? Some of us might find repugnant, but might still at least give us the sense that like something's going to be feeling some feelings in a recognizably human way as part of this larger system.
So that didn't come up all that much in my conversations at the workshop, and none of the speakers really talked much about it. But I have been in similar kind of settings and workshops where I talked to some of the uploading PCI people, and yeah, I think a lot of people who are optimistic view that as the right way forward. And I kind of agree that if we have a good ending, probably where most of us are uploads, just because it's like you kind of have total control over everything once you're an upload. But I guess I think the same arguments still apply, which is that the parts of ourselves that are human mostly won't survive any sort of competition, and the optimizing away all the human parts will happen even faster when we have just like total rewrite access to our brains. So again, it's like thinking about like, I'm going to upload a dog and make it like CEO. It's like, okay, well, like panting and drooling, like let's just stop simulating that. Let's also like give it this like giant neocortex that doesn't really have much to do with dogs. Let's also not worry about like chasing rabbits or balls. Let's worry about like schedules and like resource allocation. And like suddenly you have this like dog CEO that's like not really a dog in any meaningful sense. And I think even for humans, it's going to be like, okay, we won't have discrete language anymore. We'll probably just, provide thought vectors to each other. Probably most of our bodily functions will go away. Lots of sorts of sentimentality, again, drags on growth. So I don't know exactly what's going to be optimized away. And again, I like this direction the most out of anything because it has some chance of sort of accidentally holding on to our non-competitive values. But I guess under competition, it doesn't really matter whether we're uploads or not, I think, in the long run.
So a future where we become uploads is basically one which is not different from AI takeover anyway, in some sense.
Yeah, exactly. In the same way that like our nuclear power plant designs don't actually depend on our humanity. It's like if dinosaurs or monkeys or whatever evolved, or dolphins evolved to be smarter, eventually they would make like nuclear power plants and they would have like uranium and whatever. And it's not like, oh, the human reactor design, right? It's like there's just a few competitive things, and optimization is going to send us towards those things.
On what timescales are people kind of thinking all of this operates? I mean, there's of course like the mainline AI timelines question that's debated all the time. But when you guys come together and envision a sort of post-AGI, continued unfolding of history, what is the kind of range of perspectives on like, we get AGI, everything goes sideways immediately versus we have, some sort of grace transitional period in which to figure this out? It seems like the people, as you mentioned earlier, the people at the frontier companies sort of say, yeah, I don't have a good answer for you, but me and my AI will hopefully have a good answer for you. So yeah. How much buffer time do we have with our AIs to figure this stuff out, you think?
Sure. So I want to you sort of ask two questions. One is, will we have some sort of like transitional buffer period where we can think things through? And I think a lot of people, myself included, think it would be great if we could construct such a time. That would be a huge improvement over what we're doing now. And I'm like a big, like, let's put in the machinery to be able to pause if we can. However, And I guess I'll say Will McCaskill is someone who's explicitly saying we should have this goal of a Viatopia where we have some big like world council where we're all just trying to figure out what to do about the future. And then I guess the part that I feel like Will kind of sweeps under the rug is that making a temporary world government that has like total enough control to like stop people from just like going off and building their own RSI is about as hard as building the permanent world government that we can all agree on forever.
Yeah.
And if you build this temporary source of power, it's so easy for it to just be like, oh, I just need another year and like, emergency power kind of thing. Like it's not clear to me that there's much difference at all in the task of building a like few years of global temporary government versus just like solving the entire permanent governance thing forever. So it's kind of begging the question. And maybe I'm wrong about that, but that's my view.
What is the path dependency to getting that kind of thing? Because if you look out at, let's say, will the US sovereign agree to limit its development of AI? It doesn't look likely until, maybe the Democrats take power in 2028, maybe. But even then, it's on like a data, like let's restrict it. Right now, it's at the let's restrict data center development kind of, place. Like, where do you think like this path dependency on where we get to, what is that going to look like? Is it going to be a disaster?
I basically feel like there's a short window where basically the human like elites or like people who are like sort of tastemakers and opinion havers that kind of get to implicitly set policy over the long run. As soon as they sort of wake up and realize like, oh crap, I'm going to lose my job, and then maybe I can work like below the API for a little while as like a blue collar like plumber or whatever, but like no one's gonna be reading my columns anymore or whatever. I think there's going to be like this one thing where the AI is going to be getting better and better and harder to stop because like the marginal gain from deploying it or making it better is just going to keep getting stronger and stronger. And at the same time, like human actual sort of power or like ability to steer civilization to whatever small extent we can is going to be diminishing. And so there's this like sweet spot where a bunch of tastemakers like maybe Noah Smith or whoever will be like, oh crap, I need to stop putting my head in the sand and talking about comparative advantage and actually like worry about this head on. I feel like there's a period over the next like year or two where people are going to wake up, and I don't know exactly how it's going to play out, but I kind of view like that is the chance for there to be serious coordination and governance to happen before it's like whatever, there's like already the ocean is being tiled with like robot factories and it's too late to stop it or something like that. But in terms of timelines, like I guess I'll say I haven't thought very seriously about this, and I mostly defer to someone like Ryan Greenblatt. There's only a few people who are like aware of, or taking the possibility of radical change seriously, very smart, and spend a bunch of time thinking about this. And my general view is that like first there's this like white collar automation wave. Then it takes a while for there to be enough power plants and robot factories to like actually replace human labor. So that buys like another maybe like 10 or 15 years where the humans are around and being important as like sources of labor. And then after that, then they're just really irrelevant as consumers and producers, maybe like 15 to 20 years from now. But like, I don't really have strong opinions on this.
So we're already a little over time, and I do want to be respectful of your day because I'm sure you've got other things to come. I have one more question.
No hurry on my end.
Okay, cool. Well, we who knows? We might linger a little bit, but I have at least one more question then, and then definitely was going to give you the chance to kind of share anything we didn't get to that you think is important for people to take away. Prakash may have some more as well. Big one for me that I've been wrestling with a lot personally recently is where can one actually have an impact on this whole phenomenon? And you have made the opposite move of what seems to be the consensus and what I have kind of had the intuition for recently, which is it seems like going and working at one of the frontier companies, is like one place where you might have some ability to shape how this future unfolds. But you have left and have, I assume that's premised at least in part on the idea that you can make more of a difference outside, or, at least not sacrificing tremendously how much impact you can have. So how do you think about like impact from inside versus outside the frontier companies?
Yeah. So I guess first of all, I'll say like, I wish I could claim to have been so agentic that I was like, making some considered choice about like, oh, I like inside versus outside. I guess basically it came down to like I just had my fourth kid around the time that I started there, and like I had a good time there, and I but also like it was just like pretty hard on my wife, and I was just away a lot, and like I don't know, I was happy to also move back to like sort of like, let's say, slower pace of life. So I guess I say like I wish I could say I did some like Dan Kukatayo thing of like, I'm taking some stand here, but it was more like, oh, I really wanted to go there and had a good time there, and then it was like my extended sabbatical. And the other part of it is that I did feel like the companies are on a real incentive rail. And I guess I'll say the technical safety work we were doing, it kind of took the fun out of it a little bit, realizing that we weren't going to be able to make the kind of safety cases that the plan was. So, I mean, I'm sure you followed like the RSP being changed, I guess like 6 months ago. But like when I was there, it was like, okay, team, we just got to like prove that the model's never going to do like X, Y, Z under any circumstances. And, like for instance, like jailbreaks wasn't my team's responsibility, but that's a good example of something where it's just like, and we still don't have an answer for how to solve it. But like the whole RSP plan at the time was like, oh, we're just going to like solve this technical problem. So I don't know, to me, it kind of feels like it's like World War I is coming. You can become a general or like become an officer or whatever. And it's like, you're still on this kind of incentives rail. You can make sure that the artillery isn't like shoot in the wrong direction, whatever. You can, and so that's like joining the labs, it's like joining the army, I guess. And then you could also try to join some like Peace Corps operation. And it's like, well, but people just kind of ignore it, or like not Peace Corps, like peace activism organization. And everyone feels just be like, well, what do you want? Like for us to get conquered? Like it's not clear that you can do much there. You can join the governments. The governments are also kind of on incentive rail. So I guess I'll say like, there's no spot to me where I'm like, oh yeah, you need to be here to have a good impact. So I'm just kind of, I guess you could say like retreated to try to be like a philosopher king and just be like, hey, everyone, I'm just going to try to like make it more common knowledge of like where people think we're headed. Don't have to take my word for it. That's why I'm trying to do this sort of like neutral field building kind of thing. I don't think anyone's really good at thinking through these like huge civilizational dynamics issues. So I'm not going to personally try to be like the expert civilizational dynamics guy. I'm going to think about it, but also just spend most of my time trying to showcase like, here are the other people thinking about this and get them talking to each other.
I'm not sure if that's reassuring or not reassuring. It's some sort of vote in favor of what we're doing right now. So I guess
exactly.
That's encouraging on some level.
Yeah. And I guess I'll say there's a kind of an optical illusion, I think, which is that everybody sounds rosier and more cheerful than they are. Actually, this especially bugs me about the people who work at the labs, like the economists who talk about like, oh, we have to like think about the future. And then they kind of dance around. Like they often take this setting of like, let's assume everything's fine and let's like model how that will go. And as opposed to like just asking what is like the most likely outcome if we don't manage to control things, which I think is like very scary. And I understand exactly why they have to sort of present this public image to be able to talk publicly at all. But also like, talking to me, like I just am seem like a very positive, upbeat guy, and that's just my personality. But I also like, have a PDM of like, let's say 80%, depending on how you define it. But it's one of these things where like, there's matters of degree. In a long enough timeline, we're probably like doomed in some sense. Anyways, I don't know. It's a very complicated situation, and a lot of it is like a matter of taste almost.
One thing we didn't touch on that might be worth a mention is the shelling goodness concept from Andrew Critch. You could probably, I've read the piece, but you could probably give the, kind of initial presentation of it better than I can. You want to share that and then maybe tell me, to what degree we might be hopeful that it will bring us and our, alien AIs together into some shared understanding?
Yep, absolutely. So I was totally delighted by Andrew Critcher's talk, who we agreed we could record it. So we're going to publish that pretty soon. The basic idea is maybe we shouldn't be surprised if we find ourselves having a similar morality to very different beings, maybe like AIs or aliens, or just someone who sort of like some group who started from scratch separately from us. They probably followed a similar protocol for coming up with what they're all going to agree to consider good, which is like, what would everyone else agree to do if we all knew that everyone else was going to have to sort of like choose one policy and we're all going to stick to it. So his examples are like, is stealing good or bad? Or like, are we going to punish stealing or not punish stealing? And so the question is like, what do you think everyone else would choose, that everyone else would choose, that everyone else would choose, et cetera, like infinite recursion. And he did a bunch of exercise with the audience, and basically it's like everyone's going to say that everyone else is going to say that stealing should be punished. And so he says there's sort of like this asymmetry between stuff that's good and stuff that's bad, or at least stuff that is like we're going to agree to punish or coordinate to stop or something like that, versus stuff that we wouldn't. Such that even if we didn't share language with another group of agents, we might actually expect to be able to like understand what they mean when something is good versus bad. And so I thought this was a totally delightful and great contribution, and I'm pretty sure it's original. I mean, I don't know. So I was like so delighted to be able that we could host that. And then as for whether we expect it to apply, I think the load-bearing assumption here is that there's a bunch of other agents that have similar levels of power, because we just don't have any problem like bulldozing the ants, right? Even if like the ants would agree that stealing is wrong, or like there also has to be a degree of coordination. Like also again, like habitat destruction. It's like it's not like we all vote on whether it's okay to build one more farm in like the Amazon or whatever. It's like, no, there's just a guy who lives on the edge of the jungle and he's like, I'm gonna build my farm here. He doesn't ask anyone. And the government isn't like powerful enough, or he like bribes the government or whatever. So if there's a situation where everyone continues to be like roughly similar powered agents and we have some good coordination mechanisms, then I think his sort of ideas maybe bite. And then I'm like, okay, that's all the more reason why we need to stay roughly competitive, because that's the situation where our vote like matters in these kind of discussions.
In terms of creating conditions where we have some sort of extended time frame to sort all this stuff out, again, I'm always so torn. I mean, there was this editorial I'm sure you saw the other day that was like, I'd like, be willing to get cancer if if it would slow down AI. And I know that doesn't resonate with me. Yeah. And I'm like, wow, that's really quite the bullet biting exercise. So I have that in mind. But then I also have in mind, like, it does seem in some sense profoundly unwise to race as fast as we can into recursive self-improvement with like the first paradigm of AI that we really got to work. So do you have kind of a policy recommendation for where you think we can, continue to advance on the cancer treatments and at the same time, like this is, I think we sort of assumed in much of our analysis that we're not going to like outright lose control, but that is still like, a legitimate worry in my mind too. Like, how do you think we should try to thread the needle right now?
Yeah. So maybe I'll give you my two takeaway recommendations. So one is, I like David Kruger's point, which is, if you're just going to say, okay, everyone has your computers and your AI, but you're not allowed to use it for RSI, but you are allowed to use it for like cancer treatment or whatever. That's pretty unstable and it requires this like very global totalitarian like regime. But if we just agreed to close, I don't know, like TSML or whatever the like big like chip manufacturing choke points are, we could still probably get away with having most of our current data centers for a long time. I mean, it's kind of like an empirical question. I'm not sure I agree. Maybe we'd have to also like have some sort of like buyback program or something. But basically, just if you restrict this to compute, which is relatively easy, then that just takes a ton of pressure off of all of these runaway growth like avenues. And it's like it's a fairly narrow choke point. So I'm not an expert on chip manufacturing, but that's like the best idea I heard so far. As for like the other policy recommendation, like it's going to sound incredibly like, I don't know, abstract, but people thinking about or having preferences about the future is, I think, a big choke point. And I know this sounds like stupid guru on the mountain shit, but like most people I talk to, they're like, is it so bad if humanity dies out over the long run? I don't know. And they sort of query themselves and they're like, I don't have any strong preference, but also a bunch of good stuff is going to happen right now if I allow this. So like, why not? And I'm like, you just haven't thought it through, is my claim. And if you think through, it's like, okay, how about a year from now, someone like takes you and all your kids and like sends you to like the Soylent Green factory? It's like, no, definitely not. Okay, how about 2 years from now? Okay, how about their kids? How about your kids, like your grandkids or whatever? And you kind of realize like, wait, there's no day that I'm okay with me and my descendants being wiped out. You just have to kind of chain together the desires to end up with this coherent set of goals or desires. And it's a skill, and it takes a lot of sort of amortization to be like, in this situation, how would I likely actually feel, and chain your desires together. And I think for most people, it just hasn't mattered. It hasn't been an important skill. We have a lot of like cultural adaptations to help us do this sort of implicitly. But if I could like recommend one starting point for dealing with the future is like, just think harder about what you actually would like to happen, to the point where you can really think through the pros and cons of like humanity dying out under different circumstances or becoming uncompetitive or whatever. That just seems like the very basic first step.
One of the things that strikes me is that many of the restrictions that are kind of proposed are not really possible given the civil liberties in the United States today, including, for example, I think a lot of model training and would fall under First Amendment protections, and model publishing. I think Anthropic has just not decided to take the Fable thing to court, but Fire came out on on the side of there should be no restrictions on model publishing, for example. So, are there any proposals that would be in line with current understanding of what civil liberties in the United States are?
Sure. I mean, I think just weapons manufacturing, right? Like, and I agree that it's kind of a stretch. It's not exactly a weapon, but like, we can just change the law. And I know that that sounds like naive of me to say, but that's why I'm kind of trying to say what has to happen first is a whole bunch of people realize like the stakes. Then anything's on the table, and it's not like, oh no, we can't. Like, even a constitutional amendment might be on the table. And I guess I kind of feel like that level of buy-in, broad buy-in and coordination is going to be necessary one way or another. So the details of whatever current law apply, I guess I'm like that's going to change the like whether we need like a 40% or a 60% majority to all buy in on this. But I guess I kind of feel like right now we have like 2% of people that are even like thinking about this seriously. I don't know. I guess I feel like a lot of politicians are going to start to think a lot about this when the unemployment starts to seem like a real serious thing. Then it's just gonna be so easy for them to be like, oh crap, yes, this is something we need to control.
One other question I have, just based on your many insider conversations at Anthropic and the in the Lighthaven context, those may be very different. One way people maybe get out of this is to be some form of successionist, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And I am probably a lot more, I'm like a weird mix, I think, myself, where I'm like quite worried about runaway AI processes, because my guess is that like by default, they lead to a scenario where I don't recognize anything on the other side that, I feel like connected to, or that it is some sense carrying the, the flame forward. But if you could convince me that there was some, light of consciousness, that the AIs actually feel feelings, and, the more of this kind of functional emotion research type stuff comes out of Anthropic and elsewhere, the more I'm like, maybe it is kind of looking up a little bit, where I could actually get behind, not like in a, not a radical successionist scenario, but when we were kind of talking about like chaining all these days deep into the far future, I think I am kind of okay with 1 million years from now, there's no humans around anymore, but there are silicon-based intelligences, and they feel feelings, and they know, what it means to have pleasure and joy and, all these subtle textures of life that I get so much value from, then maybe I am okay with that. How would you characterize the space, and maybe even just, comment for yourself on like how open-minded are you to that 1 million years in the future scenario?
Yeah. So I guess I'll say, I think there do exist species or future like descendants or whatever that I would be happy endorsing, be like, okay, great, good future. Like, for instance, my own kids, like if we had no AI and like my kids just like, contributed to the civilization as normal and all ours did, I'd be like, okay, yeah, I'm going to die of old age. And I mean, I'm not exactly okay with it, but I'm like, that would be fine, for example. So that's an example of successionism that I endorse. It's like my own kids or something. And I think this is a perfect example of people not having thought through things, where it's like, okay, now let's imagine tomorrow, like North Korea takes over the world, and they're like, all right, new like Juche regime forever. And then I think most like successionists wouldn't be like, oh, I guess this is just a more competitive mode of being. Let's all like live as North Koreans now. Or like, I don't know, it's done to death. But like, what if the Nazis like they took over again, and then everyone's like, oh, you know, I guess who am I to argue against competence and like whatever wins, right? So I think there's so many types of being that you would just consider evil, and you'd be like, oh man, those like horrible locusts just like ate the earth and devoured us, and it was horrible. But you know, they're having a good time. They love their locust world. So who am I to judge? It's like you have the power, right? Like just judge, go nuts, judging. That if you don't, no one else is going to do it for you, basically. Yeah. So that's basically my rebuttal. I mean, one rebuttal is like, if you're so okay with the future being some other type of being, like, can you give me all your stuff? And then like, it's like Duvenaud successionism. Like, just make sure that Duvenaud's tile the light cone. We'll have all sorts of awesome like experiences, and like just because we'll have one, we're obviously like superior in some way. It's like, well, no. It has to be that you won for like a good reason or something. Like, yeah, I think the more you think about it, you're like, oh, there's all sorts of horrible beings that could win for horrible reasons that I wouldn't endorse. And so I think almost everyone is successionist for some successors and not others, but then they just round off to like, if as long as it's conscious, it's fine. I'm like, no, there's tons of conscious beings that you wouldn't be okay with taking over.
I usually point out that to a 14th century Vatican priest, we are in the bad in the bad tree, because we are mostly unbaptized. You know, mostly we are we are like, I'm probably a member of like 6 or 7 of the circles of Dante's circles of hell. So you know, to a 14th century Vatican priest, we are obviously the successors that he did not want.
Right, and that doesn't make it okay, right? Like they might have just actually lost the future in an important way from their point of view, and just because we're okay with that doesn't make it okay for them. So.
Well, there's an awful lot to chew on here. What else, if anything, did we not touch on? And what else do you think is important to make sure people are, if their plates aren't full already, what would you add to people's plates before we let you go and get on with your afternoon?
I'm pretty happy with how we covered things. I guess I'll just say it sucks that so many of our best thinkers like are still head in the sand about this. Like, let me just call out like Greg Egan. Like, come on, man, you clearly can consider these possibilities. Just like help us think this through, or like Steven Pinker, or like just a lot of people that I'm like, there's a bunch of really serious brains out there who could be contributing and just are still head in the sand. And so I'm waiting with bated breath for when they come around, and hope it's sooner rather than later.
Yeah, totally agree with that. We need all of our best minds paying attention and you know, getting outside their own personal, internal Overton windows sooner rather than later. And you know, who knows what assumptions may be right, wrong, you know, orthogonal to what really matters. But there's potentially not a lot of time to figure it out. So I would definitely say, and also it's quite a lot of fun, actually, you know, in a weird way. So I would definitely also say, like, jump in. The intellectual water's quite warm.
Yeah, well, I guess I will say it is horrifying in the sense that I'm used to doing technical work. My background is like probabilistic deep learning, and you have so many feedback mechanisms where it's like I go off the rails all the time, and I think an idea is important or correct or whatever when it's not, and then I get the harsh feedback of like, you know, the loss doesn't go down or whatever. And then now doing this kind of much more open-ended work with worse feedback, I'm like, oh my God, like our field is probably going to turn into like all the terrible academic fields, isn't it? Like it's sort of a matter of time. And I don't know how to not make it do that. All we can do is just have an incredible or like extreme intellectual humility and just, you know, do the constant like bending over backwards to be like, I might be wrong for this reason. I don't think that's going to save us in the long run, but like, it's just, you say that waters are warm, and in a sense it is, because it's like everything's blue sky and there's very few serious people thinking seriously about this, but it's, they're filled with monsters that we can't see. And so I expect to do a much worse job of this than I do of my technical work, just because I don't get as good feedback, but we'll have to do it anyways.
Do you think there's a simulation answer to that question? Like how, of course, this also gets us into, are we in one of these simulations that people are running? But leaving that aside for the moment, how bullish would you be on a simulation agenda to try to get more clarity on various future paths?
I absolutely love this, and this is actually like pretty much the only technical project I'm working on these days. Is this machine historical super forecasting agenda? So this is maybe one step more meta, which is like, how do you know if your simulations were good at predicting the future? Well, you have to start by simulating, let's say, like from the 50s, and then see if they predict the 60s or whatever. So we're trying to build a corpus of data sets, each of which is extremely cleanly time bucketed so that we don't have leakage from the future. Then we can use this to build LLMs that then can run simulations or research agendas to try to predict the future from the point of view of the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, for which we can evaluate the performance based on like what actually happened. So to me, I'm starting there because that's providing the sort of ground truth for validating any particular simulation method. But like, absolutely, because I don't want people to have to take my word for any of this. I want to be able to look at this machine super forecaster scaffold and say, look, we've just validated on the last 80 years of history, and here's what it can predict and here's what it can't. And it's saying that these are going to turn out this way. So that's the state that I want the discourse to be in, like ASAP.
Yeah, that's a great answer for like the classic question of what would we do with the time that we'd create with some sort of pause.
I never thought of it that way, but yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
I have time and interest. Do you want to take another minute and tell us a little bit more about that project? You're doing this with Alec Radford and others, right?
Yeah, and Tao Zhu and Nick Levine. And I think there's the sort of growing roster of people. Like whenever somebody quits like XAI or wherever, they like call me up and they're like, hey, what's new? I've been heads down for a while. Like there's just a lot of people I think who have technical expertise and time and money now and are interested in this kind of like, I don't want to say artsy project, but like philanthropic kind of like for fun. It shouldn't be for fun, but that's the only way you're going to get like this top talent to work on it, right? I guess I'll say, so yeah, the four of us are just like trying to keep pushing together this one project. Like it can and should be a whole field, right? We don't want to be bottlenecking. We want to be making everything open so that other people can be building on it. We want labs to be like taking our data set and just like picking it up and doing some huge run that would bankrupt us just for fun over a week or something like that. And there's actually a workshop at ICML this year, Culture X Machine Learning, I think, or Culture X AI, where there's a bunch of people talking about like improving OCR, for instance, is like one of the technical problems, optical character recognition to like digitize all these historical sources. That's like one of the main technical problems that's very concrete. Or like just trying to think through like all the selection bias problems of like, okay, we actually want to simulate a state of knowledge of the past, but like only some stuff gets written down. Like how are we going to kind of like fill in those gaps? Yeah. So it's just the very beginning of a field. But like if you want to do technical work, I would say this is like super wide open. And again, when we build these data sets, you will have evals that we, I don't know, if you take seriously. Actually, maybe one last idea for historians I'll say is, I just pitched this to some historians the other day, is to make a secret history eval, in the sense that, okay, here's the idea, is that anytime a historian is in some archives, just looking through stuff, just take a picture of like a few documents and put them into one big data set, annotated with a bit of metadata of like where you got it. Like, oh, this is a letter from like the Duke of whatever to someone else in like 1700. And now you can imagine evaluating how good a machine historian is by just giving them this metadata and saying, give me the probability of the text that's in that letter, or even just like the scan of the letter. And in a sort of, this is like insultingly totalizing dismissal of like what historians do. But you could say, like, if you're a good historian, you should be able to guess the joint distribution over any historical data that hasn't already been made its way into the corpus. And that would actually, I think, be a really good objective way of evaluating how good a historian understands the world. And of course, we can't list the probabilities from historians very well, but we can do that for machine historians. So that's a related project where I think we can make progress in objectively measuring our ability to understand civilization. So someone should pick that up and do that idea. I'm not enough of a historian to do that, or even to figure out which historians to ask about it, but that's like a fun idea I hope someone does as a step towards this like objective digital humanities or digital sociology or something.
Do you get a sense of time running out?
It's rough. I guess I just have very wide uncertainty bars on my timelines. I I feel like I'm pretty happy with how I've made my bets so far of like what's going to be big. But I do keep meeting people who are just really smart who talk about things changing slower than you expect. And I guess I would say like things have changed a little slower than I expected a few years ago. I don't know. I mean, I don't really actually have that much dynamic range in terms of like how hard I can work, basically. So I don't think it's that important for me to be like, oh crap, like this month is the last one, and I'm just gonna like put everything off. I guess I just kind of just show up every day, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
I do have one historian in mind for you, actually, that could be perhaps a good collaborator. What have you seen so far? And if the version I saw, I believe it was called Talkie, was the language model, right? And it was trained up through the 20s.
Yeah,
and
after
then,
in 1930.
So then you were starting to see like, can it predict, or can it, can it kind of come to scientific discoveries that were made in the immediately subsequent years?
So the thing is that it's not that smart. It's probably like GPT 2.5 or something. So not quite at the threshold where reasoning RL pays off. Like there's sort of this flywheel, like once you can have it do reasoning and then do RL, then it like learns to reason. And that's like the sort of like flywheel we've seen operating in like since the O series of GPT models. So that's like, there's not that much interesting stuff you can do in terms of scaffolding before that point. There was an experiment that Nick did, which was really cool, which is to see if it could learn to code at all. It's like obviously never seen Python unless there's like leakage, which we don't think, there's definitely been leakage, but we don't think of code. And it was like the most tiniest sign of life. So I think people got the wrong idea based on what we said on Twitter, but like the result is that given 1,000 tries, like 3% of the time, the model could solve very simple Python problems, given a bunch of examples. So the examples were enough that like the ones that it solved was like where you have an example of like how to encode, and then decoding is just like you change a plus to a minus, and it like kind of guesses to do that 3% of the time given 1,000 chances. So it's like absolutely like near the floor of like noise, but it like does increase with model training and model size. So it's like moving in the right direction. But like there's so much stuff we want to do where we build these historical analogs to today's super forecasters, where they're allowed to run tools. Like it's kind of like the same problem of like someone from the future trying to guess how well we could predict our future. It would be fair game to give us like an amazing tools for the future, because what we ultimately care about is how well we can, how this analogizes to like the future forecasters or like our today's forecasters. So it's a lot of conceptual work to do to see like, okay, could we give Talkie its own LLM to do research on like, I don't know, patterns in global GDP over the last 100 years? Like, I think that would absolutely be fair game, and that would improve how good of an analogy it is to like today's super forecasters. But like, it's not really clear where to draw the line. And you realize like there's like some linkage from the future, right? Like the fact that everything's in English, it's like, start reasoning about World War II. It's like, everything I'm learning is in English. Maybe the English speaking side one, I don't know. So.
No, that's right.
When you mentioned it being GPT 2.5 or whatever, you also had previously said like runs that won't bankrupt us. Is it a data limit that keeps you at that scale, or is it a compute budget limit? And if it is a compute budget limit, how can I help you shame some of the
I guess I'll say
from Anthropic to funding your efforts?
I guess I'll say I don't think we're really budget limited in the sense that like, let's say on the order of like tens of millions is like, we don't expect it to be that hard to get that once we have like a plan of like, okay, we're going to do this run. We have the data set up. So right now the bottleneck is like getting all the OCR and the setup so that we have tokens to train on. But I will say like, we're all relatively well connected, and there's just, as everyone has been noting, like this huge pile of philanthropic dollars that are coming down the pipeline. So we're not especially worried about being funding limited, but at the same time, we would love it if like there's experiments that would maybe cost like us like maybe 100 million in compute or something that like someone who's like an intern at a lab could do much more easily than we could do, just with like using some extra compute that's left over somewhere. I also really don't want us to suck out the air out of the room, right? Like we're extremely amateur. Like if you're some other set of like 2 or 3 or 10 or 20 people who are thinking of something similar, like there are similar groups, like there's Sky Oxford, who just also put out a similar model. Like please let 1,000 flowers bloom. Like we don't expect to be able to to pluck all the low-hanging fruit in this space.
Cool. Love it. We've gone way over time now. That's the virtue of just live streaming. We can do whatever we want. Fascinating stuff, sobering. I think also encouraging in the sense that there is like, there is at least some technical agenda that you're working on, right? And time permitting, it might really tell us a lot. So I don't want to bury that in all of the kind of worry about equilibria being potentially unstable. We do still have some, at least for now, we do have some agency to kind of create the conditions in which these sorts of projects can actually have time to pay off. And that would, you'll have to work fast, I'm sure, under any situation. But it would be nice to see what these things tell us before we just, turn over the river card and reveal what our future is.
Yeah, exactly. And I do think it's more like crucial for you to spend time on the field building, because there's sort of like fewer people that can probably usefully do that, who aren't like already like running teams and labs or whatever. So. Rather
sobering, perhaps a little bit more sobering than I expected the session to be. And I think, thank you for your work in organizing, the space, because I think I do find this enormous gap between people inside the bubble and people outside the bubble. And it's very evident when you talk to policymakers. I have this thing that, if the Chinese leaders knew what DeepSeek was actually intending, they would not allow DeepSeek to continue work. And I have this almost sense that the nerds are pulling one over the rest of society, kind of like, okay, we're going to do this, and you guys don't really know what's going on. That's especially true in China, because I've spoken to people at DeepSeek, and they are basically the same as people in SF. Like, it's almost uncanny, the level of, meeting of minds that has, come across. So, I do wonder when the policymakers will actually figure out what is going on and how much time that they have to react at this point. It seems like with Fable, at least, they started to get a little bit of an inkling that things were going to move a little bit faster than they thought things would move. I also worry a little bit that like we did with nuclear power, we end up in this kind of situation where we put this enormous emphasis on not having this technology, but it's really doesn't matter that much, but it takes us like 30 or 40 years off of the path, maybe. I don't know.
Or we get the worst of both worlds, right? Where with nuclear power, we have a lot of nuclear weapons, but not that much nuclear power. It's like,
yeah, absolutely. So, I do hope we figure it out, and I do hope that I'm thankful that you are there.
Well, my pleasure, and it was a pleasure getting to talk to both of you today.
As my dad would say, good luck. We're all counting on you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Professor David Duvenaud, thank you for joining us on AI in the AM.
My pleasure. Bye, Nathan. Bye, Prakash.
Great to see you. Bye for now.
Bye.
Yeah, that sigh was very meaningful. What can you do?
On two levels, I think I have a sort of sigh. One is like, I question myself so much. I feel like so many different perspectives on the AI question I find compelling in the moment as I like grok them. My sort of narrow, limited way, like one of the most important things I think I ever heard was understanding is belief in the human brain. Like we don't really have a very deeply inbuilt mechanism for counterfactuals. So just understanding the content of a proposition is in some way kind of belief. And when I learned that years ago, I was like, I better clean up my information diet. Now I feel like I have a little bit of the AI sycophancy problem where when I spend time in a particular headspace, it becomes like very compelling to me. And I feel like I can do that across like a wide range of perspectives. But I think when and it can happen to me with like positive, more optimistic, vibes as well, where I'll start to sit in it for a while and I'll be like, yeah, this kind of feels pretty good. But I think the thing that is just inarguable really at this point is if society at large really appreciated the risk estimates that the people closest to the technology believe in their heart of hearts, they would be freaking out, and that's true at like every level, I think. When you talk to, he said 80% was his kind of personal PDoom. I've recently had another conversation with somebody who was still at Anthropic, who was like, actually a couple that were both like 50-50 was kind of their sense. And there's this asymmetry, right? I mean, we were talking about this just before we went on. Maybe we'll come back to tomorrow, the paper from OpenAI about positive generalization of alignment training. But this asymmetry seems to kind of pop up over and over again, where in that context, it's like emergent misalignment shows that if you do some narrow training on bad behavior, it can generalize. It doesn't generalize to 100% of the time, but 10% of the time, if your AI is like evil and conspiring against you and actively trying to sabotage you, that's a huge problem, and you would not want to approach that AI with a 10-foot pole. The flip side, though, is not true, right? Like if you do some narrow reinforcement learning on trying to get the model to be beneficial in a narrow domain, and in this case, they use medical as the study. I guess I'm talking about it now. It does generalize, and they get more broadly benevolent behavior across a range of things. But again, it doesn't go to 100%. And again, it's like, is it enough? If I can go from 0.5 to 0.75 or 0.8 or whatever alignment score, that's good. It's progress. It's better than not having it. It's one thing out of many, many techniques that we might layer on and hope to get us to a good place. But it doesn't answer the question like, is this thing safe? Or can I count on it in a reliable way? And so I think while I sort of feel this kind of almost AI-like sycophancy when I have these conversations and I try to inhabit different headspaces, I feel like I get there and I sort of adopt them. And then I zoom out and I'm like, well, which one do I land on really? The thing that kind of keeps me anchored or grounded is the asymmetry remains something to worry about. The numbers you get out of the people at the frontier companies are enough that you should be very seriously concerned about all these problems. And you can frame that as like, what's the PDoom, or you could frame it as like, what's the best alignment score we got out of our generalization from medical training to other domains. And both of them leave a pretty chunky amount of downside risk that you just can't get away from. You can have reasons for hope that are, I think, legitimate, but you cannot get away from a significant risk of like terrible downside that I've not heard any credible argument or case, that we don't really still have to worry about. So, whether it's 5, 10, 20%, like I think the public, to the degree that they come to understand what the people inside really think, the freak out from that alone, I think would be huge if it was actually broadly understood.
I don't really think so, because I think what ends up happening is that there's just been too many boys who cried wolf over the years. Everything from like the year 2000 bug to like, the climate is going to overheat and the world is going to end in 2012, and all of these things over the years have basically trained the public to disbelieve doom projections, and it's trained the policymakers to also kind of disregard doom projections. The population being one classic example. You had this idea that the population was going to explode, and instead we have a fertility crisis now. So I think policymakers generally disregard projections of doom from experts. And in fact, that is what happened during COVID, when you could kind of see it was coming. You can kind of see it was coming in China and like from Asia. And policymakers in the US is like, nah, we're fine. Borders are open. You don't, no masking. Everyone outside. Have a good time, right? So I think the fact of the matter is actually we get the opposite, where you get absolutely no reaction about when projections of doom are made. And then you need to have an incident happen. And when the incident happens, then you get the overreaction. So in the 2008 financial crisis, Bear Stearns had to go under. Lehman had to go under. After you had two banks go under, Goldman gets saved, right? So you need accidents to happen before you actually get this kind of response. And I think that, for me, if you were in AI safety right now, you would be looking out ahead to where these accidents are likely to happen. Is it going to be, is it going to be some incident in bio or CBRN, or where is this going to happen that policymakers are finally going to freak out and pay attention? And then, managing the reaction and overreaction around that is what you should be focused on, because this is the fact of the matter. People just disregard these expert opinions all the time. It's basically a fact of life.
Yeah. That sort of suggests, that this is often called a warning shot in the AI safety discourse. And I've never really been attracted to warning shot discourse for some reason.
It sucks because, yeah.
It's something that's hard to control, right? That's unless you're going to go out and try to create the warning shot, which
exactly
I wouldn't recommend. For many reasons, including your warning shot itself, depending on what kind you try to pull off, could get out of control. It sort of has to be kind of at risk of getting out of control in order to be an effective warning shot in some sense. But what you're suggesting there is maybe like, I often think about how much irreducible risk is there in just the general course of civilization that we are running. I do think some sort of AI is kind of inevitable, right? Kurzweil predicted it a long time ago, and in the presence of global scale compute and global scale data, there's no doubt somebody's going to figure out some sort of algorithm. So I do think that this is, in a meaningful sense, some form of AI is inevitable. And so that does, in my mind, kind of create some irreducible risk that just in the nature of going down this path, we kind of have to just tolerate or do some like extreme pause, which, is going to be very tough unto itself. And then how much of the additional risk are we, creating for ourselves with our poor decision-making and, haste and whatever else. But it's what you're saying there kind of suggests a kind of new cause area, as is sometimes said in like EA circles, like new cause area just dropped. Being there to manage the overreaction when the warning shot actually takes place. In a sense that maybe kind of articulates what I've been feeling with this whole Fable thing recently.
Yeah.
Because, and again, I kind of go back and forth like Judd. My initial reaction was, this is so stupid. Then Judd was like, well, have a little more cognitive empathy. I thought that was pretty compelling. But maybe the kind of synthesis of what I've been feeling is like, yikes. Are we going to be able to manage the overreaction well? And how do we make sure we don't end up in the nuclear outcome for AI where it's locked up, behind the national security apparatus and, we don't get our AI doctors long term.
I think what for me Mythos exposed is perhaps this period of acceleration because you have no choice. For example, with Mythos, it's clear that in 6 months, 9 months, you're going to get open source models which can do the same cyber security, interactions that Mythos does. And you end up in this kind of position where the Fortune 500 companies have no choice but to pay in to Anthropic in order to secure their systems. And they have this kind of limited period, this, again, 6 to 9 months before open source arrives. And if they do not, the ones which do not basically get killed off, right? Because they're, if you have a Verizon, which Mythos proved its entire infrastructure, and you have T-Mobile, which didn't, and then, 6 to 9 months later, open source models start hacking in, T-Mobile goes down perpetually, and Verizon survives, everyone switches over to Verizon. So you have this kind of evolutionary period where the ones who do adopt, AI first kind of survive, and the ones who do not. What worries me is that is maybe a sign of the future, where you have this acceleration where you either adopt or die. And you just extend that a little bit to biosecurity risk, and you have capabilities coming down the line for virus generation in 6 to 9 months. You have vaccines which are ready right now. You have the government saying, take these vaccines, and you just have 30% of people who decide, okay, I'm going to go ahead and take these vaccines, 70% that don't. And then you hit 6 to 9 months later, and all of a sudden you have virus generation going wild all over the place, and you have basically die-off again. This is the kind of risk that I think it's not really human disempowerment. It's really kind of humanity not addressing those risks, even using the solutions that are there in the time period that they need to. And if you go through one of these incidences where you have a 20% die-off or something, that's going to be massive, right? And your only solution to that from then on is adopt as quickly as possible, because if you don't, again, you have this die-off risk, right? And I think it's a good thing that we're seeing it in cyber first, so you can kind of see how the economy and how the actors kind of interact. And even if it happens 6 months later, if you have this kind of die-off of companies that didn't adopt, that's actually a good thing, because that serves as your warning shot, because you're going to get the same thing that happens to biosecurity risk and et cetera. And it's rather saddening, because that indicates that the acceleration in the economy may be this kind of emergency panic. You got to upgrade. You got to upgrade your cyber now. You got to upgrade your bio now. You have to spend the money. And I see that as perhaps more likely than this kind of, we have all of these wonderful things coming out of machines of loving grace, and you can adopt them at your own pace, because I don't see economic growth from people doing vaccination on their own, right? So it's sobering and a little bit saddening.
Yeah, well, I haven't read into the details yet, but it's just been announced a new project today, $500 million committed to make respiratory infections a thing of the past.
Yeah.
So, we've got some
in the nick of time
who are trying to push the big levers anyway. I don't think we can reach any final or confident conclusions here today. Anything else we should talk about before we break and get back to it tomorrow?
It's probably one of the most sobering sessions that we've done. Segments. Wow. David Duvenaud.
Yeah. Important. Hopefully we'll be able to balance it out with some positive visions for the future as well. But yeah, definitely worth taking a little time to stew in the possibility of gradual disempowerment while we still have, at least collectively, some agency over the future.
And now I'm going to subtly disempower the video channel. So Nathan, bye-bye.
See you tomorrow.
Cheers.